Chapter 656. Hey, are you okay? Yorko nudged number 76 with his other foot, but she did not respond. He sighed and moved closer to her. Then he picked up the coat that had fallen on the ground with his mouth and covered both of them. Forget about romance. Let's just sleep like this for one night. After experiencing so many twists and turns, he found himself unexpectedly calm. The underground auction, spending a lot of money, being the center of attention, and the witch's night attack. In just one night, he had experienced something that he had not experienced for more than 20 years. And this thrilling feeling was not as bad as he had imagined. Of course, if Yorko were to experience it again, he would never agree to it. After a sleepless night, it was already noon the next day when the people of the exhibition found them in a daze. Yorko was then quickly moved to a spacious and comfortable room. Not only did servants bring him soft bread and freshly squeezed juice, but also maids checked him from head to toe, including the area between his legs. At his request, Luashi, who had been waiting anxiously outside, was also taken into the karst cave. What happened? Otto asked eagerly as soon as he saw the ambassador. I heard that you were injured. You can leave now. After dismissing the servants sent by Black Money, Yorko told them the whole story. You've really put me in a bad situation. I almost lost my life. Fortunately, they didn't kill me for my kindness and care for the witches in the auction. If it had been someone else, he would have become a cold corpse. Complaining was his specialty in Grey Castle King City for many years. Even if he could not get any practical benefits, he could at least earn some guilt or sympathy, which might be useful in the future. And judging from Otto's appearance, he was sure that he would not be indifferent. As expected, the latter looked very uneasy. This is my negligence. I'll make it up to you when we go back. What about the 4,000 golden dragon coins? The witches escaped from your room, which is under the jurisdiction of Black Money. They probably won't deduct the bidding fee. Didn't you save a lot of money? Yorko teased. You saved the witches and didn't waste the black letter. The black letter will be remade every time the exhibition is held, so it's not exactly wasteful. Otto smiled helplessly. But the golden dragon has been saved. Yorko suddenly remembered what number 76 had said in his ear. You only need to pay Black Money 500 golden dragon. Sir, do you want to buy me? Compared to 4,000, 500 was not that much of an exaggeration. Perhaps he could ask Otto to be generous this time? Just take it as compensation for the fright. Yorko cleared his throat and was about to speak when the bedroom door was pushed open. A man wearing a silver mask walked in accompanied by 2 attendants. It was obvious that he was quite old. His dark brown hair was mixed with many silver strands. He was wearing a loose silk robe, and the pitch-black dragon head logo on his chest was particularly eye-catching. I'm the person in charge of this round of the exhibition. You can call me Silver Mask. He bowed slightly. Black Money apologizes for what happened to you. Fortunately, you weren't hurt in this accident. We've launched an investigation into the witch's escape, and will inform you as soon as we have any news. The auction price won't be deducted from the black letter, unless we can catch the witches, and you still need her by then. Ahem. I understand. Yorko coughed twice. After all, it was still him who wanted to buy the witches, not Luashi, so he had to continue the show. Don't hand her over to anyone except me. The 10th round of the auction will always be valid. As you wish. By the way, how did the people who attacked me get into the exhibition? These murderers kidnapped other visitors. We've found 2 other victims who were robbed of their black letters in a house in the suburbs, Silver Mask replied. More than one person? Yes, this was a premeditated action. He nodded. We didn't expect the witches to have other accomplices. In other words, we didn't expect them to have the guts to attack when the King of Dawn was searching for them. Did the person who threatened you leave any clues? No, she ran away when she heard that I was the ambassador of Grey Castle. Yorko spread his hands. Hasn't Black Money thought of changing to a more reliable audit method? I suppose it's not the first time that people can enter just by relying on an invitation, right? You're absolutely right. A burst of laughter came from under the silver mask. But this is also the charm of Black Money. Compared to the risk, people prefer to be able to bid for their favorite goods without revealing their identity. Of course, when we issue the black letter, we carefully consider each target, including the importance of the black letter and the ability to keep it safe. No matter who the black letter came from, the two victims definitely won't have another chance to get an invitation. Well, Yuriko shrugged. So how did she escape from the underground? I remember there are many guards on the passage from the karst cave to the courtyard. It's impossible for her to run out with a burden. Could the criminals who sneaked in still be hiding somewhere in the underground cave? Waiting for you to let your guard down? Silver Mask shook his head. They crawled out through the air vents. Several iron fences were burned through, which should be caused by the witch's ability. Is this the escape route that Annie prepared in advance? And more than one witch participated in this rescue. It seems that Otto's efforts were in vain. In this case, there's no other way. Yuriko pretended to change the subject inadvertently. I wonder how my guide is doing. She'll be severely punished by black money. Protecting the distinguished guests is also a guide's responsibility. She's no longer qualified to take this position. Can I see her? Do you mean you want to punish her personally? No. Yuriko glanced at Otto. I want to buy her. But she's already a sinner of black money. Silver Mask said hesitantly. 500 golden dragon? Let's pay with the black letter. Wait. Mr. Ambassador? Otto was surprised. What guide? Yuriko pressed Otto's hand and did not answer. Silver Mask was silent for a while, and then nodded. I see. If you insist, we'll give number 76 to you as a gift. As a gift? Yuriko was stunned at first, then he was delighted. Chapter 657. Holding the Stone of Lighting, Banach Lothar walked step by step to the deepest part of the black money. It was a steep slope. Even with the help of his servants, he still found it difficult to walk. I'm old after all. He felt sad. At the age of 20, he took over the family business from his father. Today, he had built the Chamber of Commerce into a behemoth with wealth comparable to that of a country. Only he knew the struggle and excitement during this period. Even though the title of Sir was only an honorary one, his reputation and status in the Kingdom of Dawn were not much lower than that of the three families of Radiant Light. But great achievements did not mean that they could be passed on to future generations. In fact, as the scale of the Chamber of Commerce continued to expand, its foundation was in jeopardy. In order to consolidate the strength of the Chamber of Commerce, many influential businessmen, and even upper-class nobles joined it. When he was alive, they were either reliable arms or valuable pawns. But what about after he died? Would they still be willing to stay in their current positions? This question hardly needed to be answered. Banach had 5 sons and 1 daughter. Among them, the most outstanding son, Victor Lothar, was only 21 years old. Although he had shown extraordinary talent in business, he could not suppress his cunning partners at such a young age. The Chamber of Commerce was not the private property of the Lothar family. If he forced Victor to take over his position, he was afraid that he would suffer a strong backlash. At that time, it was not a big deal for the Chamber of Commerce to be torn apart, but his children might be in danger. But to give away the behemoth that he had worked hard to build in his life, Banach was really unwilling to do so. As he was thinking, he suddenly slipped. Sir, be careful. The servants beside him immediately held him. Banach adjusted his body several times before he regained his footing. Obviously, this body no longer had the vigor of youth. He was already 69 years old. How many times could he repeat such a steep slope? He had to hurry. At the thought of the promise given by the oracle, Banach's heart was rekindled. Only by becoming one of them could he solve this seemingly unsolvable problem once and for all. The downslope gradually became flat, and the surrounding air began to become humid. Banach faintly heard the sound of the underground undercurrent hitting the stone wall, which was like continuous thunder, dull and vigorous. To be honest, he didn't like this kind of place. Although it was secluded enough, it didn't give people a sense of security. He was always worried that one day the water would break down the walls of the cave and swallow this place completely. In fact, many similar situations had already occurred in this group of caves. There were quite a few passages that had turned into deep pools due to the backflow of underground water. In the end, they had no choice but to be sealed. Black money only occupied a small part of the karst caves. If Banach was given enough time, he could even build an underground city here. When they reached the bottom of the slope, the light suddenly dimmed. It was not that the stone of lighting had dimmed, but the space around them had suddenly expanded several times, and the light could no longer illuminate the stone walls on both sides. The sound of the underground water flow became very loud, as if a branch was passing under their feet. In the pitch-black cave, 2 balls of yellow light were flickering in the distance. They were the guards sent by the oracle to receive him. "All right, you guys can send me here. But Your Excellency, there's still a long way ahead." The servant said worriedly. "It doesn't matter. I'll walk the last part of the road by myself," Banach said slowly. The two did not dare to say another word due to the power he had accumulated over the years. "Yes, please be careful, Your Excellency." Leaving the cave entrance, he carefully walked to the center of the karst cave. This cave at the bottom of the karst cave group was very strange. It was shaped like an isolated island, surrounded by bottomless ravines. The protruding rock mountain in the center, and the slope were only connected by a narrow stone bridge. When he walked on the bridge, he was surrounded by darkness, and the magic stone could only illuminate a few meters under his feet. If it were not for the yellow light on the opposite side, Banach would even have the illusion that he was walking in the abyss of hell, and the roaring water under his feet was the hissing of ghosts and evil spirits. A thin mist gradually rose around him, and the range of light was further reduced. It was formed by excessive water vapor. He knew that he had to be very careful. The bridge was likely to be covered with moss. If he slipped off the stone bridge, even the oracle could not save him. Facing the moist air, Banach Lothar finally arrived at the central rock island. Before he could take 2 breaths, the oracle's guard had turned around and walked backward. "Follow me. Your Excellency has been waiting for you for a long time." Having no time to complain, he took a deep breath and followed the two. The peak of this isolated island-like rocky mountain was no more than 100 paces in radius. It wasn't very big, and the place to meet the oracle was located inside the mountain. Before stepping on the stone stairs around the mountain, Banach noticed that there was an extremely wide cave behind the karst cave. It was connected with the slope that he came from and formed a straight line. However, it was much closer to the rock mountain and also much larger. The cave wall was a standard circle, and the edge that the magic stone could illuminate was very smooth, as if it was artificially carved. If he guessed right, the oracle's guard must have entered the Kingdom of Dawn through this underground passage. After entering the rock mountain, Banach was so tired that he almost could not stand. Fortunately, the oracle did not care about the posture when they met. The guard brought a soft cushion and let him sit in the 1 square foot stone room. Then he put down the heavy curtain to isolate the sound of water outside. "Are you ready?" one of them asked. "Yes, please summon Your Excellency." Banach wiped the fine sweat on his forehead. Although he was exhausted, his heart was full of expectation. As soon as he finished speaking, the magic stone of lighting in his hand suddenly flashed. Not only his, but also the magic stones of the other 2 guards. Then the 3 light sources went out one by one, and the stone room was shrouded in pitch-black darkness. As it was not the first time that Banach had seen such a scene, he was not surprised. Instead, he was full of admiration and awe for the power of the oracle. Soon, a purple light curtain rose from the ground, turning the surrounding darkness into a different scene. It was also deep in the ground, but red lava flowed below. Numerous rivers of fire gushed out of the holes in the rock wall and converged at the lower part, forming a cobweb-like picture. Above the illumination of the flames was the oracle's torso, a huge sarcoma with countless roots like a plant hanging on the rock wall. The tangled epidermis pulsed rhythmically, as if it was breathing hot air. It had neither eyes nor mouth, but it could see and talk to him, directly through his consciousness, echoing in his mind. This was the true appearance of the oracle. It did not need to transform into a human form because it itself was extraordinary. Chapter 658. No need to be so polite. The female voice appeared directly in his mind. "What's the situation up there?" He did not need to speak either. He only needed to think the answer in his mind. It was difficult to adapt to this kind of communication at first, but after mastering it, communication became very smooth. Of course, it was also more difficult to lie. Oracle, something unexpected happened. They didn't accept the invitation of the ambassador of Grey Castle. Banach repeated the whole story. It was my mistake. I didn't expect them to be so vigilant. A plan that calculates people's minds is easy to fail. The oracle's tone did not sound dissatisfied, but was mixed with an inexplicable nostalgia. Do you have any remedial measures? As long as they have to accept the invitation, he paused. Take advantage of His Majesty Apanmoya's new policy. Tisk. Mortals. Banach could not help but be stunned. My lord? I don't like this witch elimination policy. Can you guarantee that no one will get hurt? This. Not to mention getting hurt, it would be normal if some of the witches were captured and executed. After all, the purpose of the plan was to let the witches set off to the south and go to the western region of Grey Castle. As for those who survived, there was no requirement. Is this what you think? The oracle's voice suddenly rose a few octaves. The wriggling tentacles on its body and the surging lava under the ground showed its anger. Don't forget what I said in the face of doomsday, every witch is important. No, my lord, I bear in mind every word you said, Banach said to himself. He was communicating with the oracle through his mind, and any thoughts would be conveyed to the oracle. I naturally hope that no innocent people will be hurt, but that will take more time, and the manpower will need to be rearranged. Not everyone has the courage to go against the royal family, and at the same time keep the secret. Let my guards help you, the oracle quickly replied. How long will it take? Banach was relieved. He had seen the ability of these guards. An ordinary knight was no match for them, and the weaker ones could not even see their movements. If 2 or 3 of them fought side by side, they could easily resist 10 times their number of knight, which was enough to show that the oracle was extraordinary. The third step of the plan should be completed within 2 weeks. Then let's do it. Lord Oracle. Banach hesitated. Are witches really so important? Would God only favor them? In terms of wealth or power, I'm more suitable. A more suitable chosen one? The oracle interrupted him. You don't know what you're talking about. Neither wealth nor power means anything at the end of the world. God was looking for a savior who could use his great power, not a spokesperson for the secular world. You are indeed very useful, mortal, so when the task is completed, I will give you a suitable reward, such as immortality, but you must also know your place. Banach knew what the doomsday referred to. Every 400 years, a blood-red moon would appear in the sky, and the gates of hell would open accordingly. The devils would swarm out of it, and a massacre would soon sweep the entire continent. Those who could resist these ferocious aliens were called the Chosen Ones. Now he had a better understanding of the Chosen Ones. The person the oracle was looking for seemed to have a direct connection with the power of God, and she must be a witch. But he was still a little reluctant. Will there definitely be a chosen one among the witches in Grey Castle? The oracle fell into a rare silence. After a while, the voice sounded again. No one knows the answer. This is just an attempt, and such an attempt has been going on for hundreds of years. What if you can't find it? Then keep looking until the end of the world destroys everything. If everyone died, then immortality would be meaningless. It seemed that he had to beg God to let him find something on this trip. Banach smiled bitterly. I see. I'll try my best to do this. The tentacles on the sarcoma wriggled neatly, which was a sign of satisfaction. There's one more thing. Is the church really defeated? Since the news of the church's defeat reached the Kingdom of Dawn, the oracle had been particularly concerned about it. He even asked Banach to personally send someone to Coldwind Ridge to verify whether the news was true. It's true. The foot of Coldwind Ridge looks like it has been trampled by demonic beasts. There are deep pits and ravines everywhere, and there are thousands of graves around. According to the locals, this was all done by the king of Grey Castle. All his dead were brought back to the western region of the kingdom, while the dead of the church were burned and buried on the spot. In addition, the merchants who came back from the Hermes Plateau also said that the whole holy city was dead silent, completely devoid of the prosperous atmosphere of the past. Is this their end? The oracle's voice suddenly became very light, but it returned to normal in a blink of an eye. Let's call it a day. I'm tired. Yes, Your Excellency. Bonok bowed and said. The scene in the lava receded like the tide, and darkness soon swept over. Then the magic stone flashed a few times and lit up the stone room again. Everything was like a dream. The medicine this time. A guard handed over a porcelain bottle. Drink it. The oracle is very satisfied with your recent performance. Thank you, the oracle, for your reward. Bonok took the porcelain bottle excitedly and drank the liquid in the bottle. Suddenly, a burning warm current rose from his stomach, making his whole body regain strength, and his hands and feet seemed to be much more flexible. Unfortunately, the effect of the medicine could not be maintained for a long time, nor could it prolong his life. According to the oracle, in addition to relieving fatigue and restoring physical strength in a short time, it also had a certain strengthening effect on the body. Before being granted immortality, he needed to repair his broken body bit by bit in order to withstand the severe pain of the transformation. Otherwise, the power would tear him apart. It was these words that made Bonok believe in the oracle. If the oracle was a liar, just taking out this medicine that could rejuvenate the body would be enough to make a large number of nobles and rich merchants completely fall for it. Why would it be necessary to tell the oracle the function and nature of the medicine? 3 years ago, he could only move in a wheelchair pushed by a servant. Now he could at least stand and walk on his own feet, relying on the oracle's secret medicine. If he could fulfill the oracle's request and further obtain immortality, all the problems that troubled him would be easily solved. Bonok lifted the curtain and walked to the stone stairs around the mountain with his head held high. Chapter 659. Roland made himself a cup of tea and looked at Nightingale. Do you want it? Yes, thank you. She leaned back on the recliner, holding a dried fish in one hand and a new script written by May in the other. She was reading it with relish. Ever since Anna talked to her, Nightingale disappeared for 2 days. When she reappeared in front of Roland, she seemed to have been relieved of a heavy burden and returned to her previous carefree self. She always had a smile on her face, and she would occasionally sneak a few glances at him, her eyes full of energy, just like how she was now. She put her feet on the coffee table without hesitation, and her robe was pulled to one side, revealing her slender legs wrapped in black stockings. She would only temporarily hide herself when someone came in. This seductive posture made Roland's eyes look to the side involuntarily. As a result, half the morning had passed, and he hadn't even finished a single drawing. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have asked Soroya to draw these thermal socks that were close to nylon material. He brought a cup of tea that emitted a pleasant fragrance to Nightingale. This is the tea you wanted. She put down the script, took it with both hands and sniffed hard. It smells so good. Can you add a piece of sugar for me? In the future, Nightingale was undoubtedly in the middle between the salty and sweet factions, and she wouldn't get fat no matter how much she ate. During the period when Roland was unconscious, she lost a lot of weight, and she lost a lot of weight. However, after he woke up, she quickly returned to normal, and there seemed to be an upper limit to her weight. After reaching this standard, it would no longer increase. In the past, Roland would nag her that eating too much would make her fat, but now he realized that she didn't need to worry about this at all. After putting a piece of sugar into her teacup, he returned to the table and drew a few more strokes. Finally, he couldn't hold back his curiosity and said, Nightingale. Anna, what did she say to you? Well, she flashed and steadily appeared on the desk. It's a secret. You can't even tell me? It's Anna's request. Nightingale hesitated and shook her head. If it's about me, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But this, she asked me to keep it a secret for the time being. Okay. Roland took a sip of tea and didn't ask any more questions. Although he could go straight to Anna, anyone with a normal EQ wouldn't repeatedly mention this matter at a time like this. At least he could see that Anna wasn't angry about it. Just as he picked up the quill again, Nightingale suddenly said, Thank you. What? Roland was stunned. He raised his head and met her eyes. The autumn sun dyed her long golden hair and left bright spots on her face. Her moving face was as beautiful as a painting under the warm sunlight. Time seemed to stop because of it. Thank you for telling her my wish. In the afternoon, good news came from the Ministry of Construction. According to the new steelmaking facility drawings drawn by Roland, the first converter steel mill was completed at the foot of the North Slope Mountain. Of course, rather than calling it a factory, it looked more like a simple iron shed. Inside, there was a rather large piece of new equipment. Unlike the previous furnaces, the smelting equipment was made of steel from top to bottom. The angular grate and the huge converter had been coated with a heat-resistant coating. The dull gray surface gave off a majestic and heavy feeling under the sun. When Roland arrived at the furnace area with the officials from City Hall, the new furnace was surrounded by the recruited veteran workers. Obviously, everyone was full of curiosity about it. Your Majesty, can this furnace really be used to smelt steel? It doesn't even have a place to burn the fire. Although Wuxia of the Ministry of Construction had doubted this before, he still followed the requirements of the drawings and completed the converter meticulously. Its parts were all made by Anna. With the help of Hummingbird, the time limit was shortened to 1 week. In nature, only fire can produce heat, Roland said with a smile. Tell the workers to prepare for the furnace test. The 3 main technologies for steelmaking were the open hearth furnace, the converter, and the electric furnace. Roland thought for a long time, and chose the third one after excluding the electric furnace. Although the open hearth furnace was the simplest in structure, and was closer to the traditional furnace in operation, its shortcomings were also very obvious. First of all, it required a large amount of fuel, which was very disadvantageous to the available resources of Neverwinter. After all, the coal mine was far away at the source of the Redwater River, and the coking plant had just started. It was already very difficult to meet the needs of the blast furnace. Adding an open hearth furnace to smelt steel would cause a shortage of fuel. This was also the biggest advantage of the converter. It almost did not need to consume fuel. By oxidizing the impurities such as manganese, silicon, and carbon in the pig iron, it automatically released heat and kept the temperature of the molten iron at a high level so that the smelting reaction could continue. The second disadvantage of the open hearth furnace was that it occupied a large area and took a long time to smelt. In order to strengthen the use of fuel, the open hearth furnace needed to build a heat storage pool to preheat the air in advance, which took more than half a day to produce a furnace of molten iron. If it was a converter, the size of the furnace was the same as the size of the equipment, and the rail and molten iron transportation system could be used together. The smelting process only took dozens of minutes, and when the technology was mature, it could even be shortened to less than a quarter of an hour. In view of these 2 advantages, Roland chose the converter as the main steelmaking equipment in Neverwinter in the future. With the help of the steam engine, the workers quickly poured a large pile of pig iron ingots into the pear-shaped furnace. Anna, start the fire. Anna nodded and went up the stairs to the top of the converter. She summoned the black fire to melt the iron ingots. After a while, the red-hot molten iron in the furnace shone on her face. When the production officially started, the molten iron in the steel mill would be supplied by the blast furnace, which was why he built the steel mill in the furnace area. Follow the steps I told you, Roland said to the person in charge of the steelmaking team. Insert the blowpipe into the mouth of the furnace. Although it was the first time for these selected veteran workers to work in the converter, they had operated similar subsystems before, so there was no essential difference between operating the blowpipe and controlling the trailer. The steam engine rumbled, and a steel pipe slowly fell from the top of the furnace into the furnace. The other end of the steel pipe was connected to a coated flexible pipe, which led to the steam engine driving the air extraction equipment. As the oxygen-rich air was sucked into the converter, the furnace mouth suddenly burst into flames. Orange sparks splashed from the furnace like blooming fireworks. The dazzling white light was so dazzling that it was almost impossible to look at it directly. This spectacular scene amazed the officials in City Hall. Facing the scorching heat wave that was blowing against his face, Roland felt incomparably satisfied. Chapter 660. As the molten iron surged, silicon and manganese were oxidized first, and then the carbon in the pig iron was oxidized. At a temperature of more than 1,500 degrees, the carbon and oxygen in the air combined to form carbon monoxide. The heat release caused the furnace to boil. The flame ejected from the furnace mouth almost engulfed the blowpipe and the grate. This was why the grate was also covered with a heat-resistant coating. A large amount of carbon monoxide escaped and came into contact with the abundant air outside the furnace mouth. Then it burned violently, as if the furnace had been set on fire. For a moment, the roar produced by the expansion of the gas overshadowed the sound of the steam engine. Everyone could not help but step back in the face of this volcanic eruption. Only Roland stood with his hands behind his back, facing the hot wind, completely immersed in the roar of the steel flame. Unfortunately, the current technology could only inject air to smelt steel. If pure oxygen could be used in the future, the flame would be even brighter. The last to participate in the reaction were phosphorus and sulfur. When the oxides of these two and limestone formed slag, the flame began to recede. At this time, the molten iron had basically become steel. The lighter slag floated on top of the molten iron. As long as the converter tilted, the molten iron could be poured out of the tap like pouring tea. According to the rules of modern steel mills, at this time, slag blocking balls, slag blocking darts, infrared detection and other methods would be used to prevent the scum from flowing into the ladle. The current technology in Neverwinter was not capable of this, so Roland's solution was very simple. He did not pour the molten steel too thoroughly. When there was still a small amount of molten steel left in the furnace, he would directly lift the furnace and then pour it out with the slag. It was not a big deal to waste a little bit of molten steel. If he collected a lot of molten steel, he could put it back in the furnace and refine it again. To ensure the quality of the steel, the last step was to remove the excess oxygen in the molten iron. The continuous shipment of bauxite from Longsong's stronghold could act as a deoxidizer. A barrel of pure aluminum separated by Wuxia was poured into the molten steel. The resulting alumina slag, along with the unreacted aluminum, floated to the surface. At this point, the whole steelmaking process was completed. When the bright molten steel flowed into the mold and turned into pieces of dark red steel ingots, the officials in City Hall were so shocked that they couldn't speak. In this era, the main method of making steel was still at the level of forging steel. A steel armor could be passed down from generation to generation as a family heirloom. No one had ever seen steel being produced like flowing water. Even though the Star of Steel could produce steel in large quantities, most people regarded it as an accessory of the witch's ability. Without Anna and Wuxia, this kind of steel could not be produced. But this time it was different. Seeing that ordinary people could do it without the help of witches, they faintly understood what it meant. There was only one Star of Steel, but there could be countless converters and workers. Steel was no longer a rare material. From now on, this strong metal would be produced in large quantities from the foot of the North Slope Mountain to replace the soft and fragile wooden and bronze wares. Roland, on the other hand, was very satisfied with the frightened expressions on the faces of the City Hall officials. If they could not be moved by the majestic beauty of the steelmaking process, they probably would not be a qualified leader. The workers might only see the steel ingots in front of them, but they should be able to see the future behind the steel ingots. So far, Neverwinter's coal and iron recycling industry had begun to take shape. From mining to smelting iron, from smelting iron to steelmaking, and finally to casting steel into all kinds of objects. This process could be achieved by ordinary people. Coupled with the rapid growth of the population and the popularization of education, Roland could already hear the sound of the steel wheel rolling over the earth. Of course, the quality of the newly produced steel still needed to be further tested by Wuxia. According to the test results, the blowing time and slag removal formula could be slowly adjusted, but everything had finally begun. After completing a great undertaking, Roland did not stop at all. With the help of the memory replay in the dream world, he still had a lot of work to do. Now that the elementary textbooks had been updated and re-edited, he turned his attention to the higher-level mechanical teaching materials. Now that Neverwinter had the foundation of mass production of steel, The high-performance processing equipment was undoubtedly something he urgently needed. The first few batches of simple machine tools were becoming less and less suitable for processing high-end products. When faced with components such as longsong cannons, heavy machine guns, and grenade fuses, they were somewhat inadequate. Where could he find the detailed drawings? The school library might be a good choice. When Roland was studying, he often went there, but he did not encounter the legendary encounter. Instead, he read a lot of miscellaneous books, many of which were related to the principles of mechanical design. After dinner, he went to bed early. Since wandering in the other world did not count as sleeping, the first day would be very difficult if he followed the normal schedule. In addition, there was no air conditioning in the apartment building, so it was impossible to catch up on sleep under the hot noon sun. He could only go to sleep early and use the energy he had saved in his dreams. When he entered the dream world, it was still a sunny midsummer morning. There were more than 10 missed calls on the phone beside the bed. Opening them, he saw that they were all from drug dealers, and the same was in his message box. "Brother, do you still have any armor? I have a friend who is looking for some filming time. Contact me immediately if you have any. The price can be higher this time. How about 700? Swords and sabers have also increased by 200. That's nice, right? But I don't need to use it. It looks quite scary. If you're not satisfied with the price, we can discuss it again. Big brother, can you answer me?" Roland directly turned to the last message, which was sent by the bank. It showed that the balance in his card had increased to 3,600 yuan, of which 1,500 yuan was the living expenses sent by Zero's family. The money would last him a long time. With a light tap of his fingers, he deleted all the messages, put on a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, and walked into the living room. Zero had not gotten up yet. Roland was too lazy to wait for the little girl to make breakfast. He went downstairs and found a noodle shop in the alley to sit down. "Boss, a big bowl of shredded meat noodles." Okay. Now that he had money, he should naturally enjoy it, right? It was a delicacy that even the king could not enjoy. After all, there was no rice in Grey Castle. The boiled noodles were soon served. Roland ate breakfast while observing the apartment building across the street. Chapter 661. These losers from the Soul Battlefield had obviously been completely accepted by the dream world. The most obvious thing was that although they had different colored hair, and their faces were very different from those of the city residents, no one felt that it was strange. For example, Roland himself had long gray hair, a high nose bridge, and light gray eyes. If he had been in the original world, he would definitely have attracted the attention of many people. Now the residents were just like ordinary people. Young men were biting deep-fried dough sticks, carrying briefcases and newspapers under their arms. They were walking in a hurry, probably to catch the early bus to the company. The old people gathered in the open space in front of the apartment building in twos and threes. Some were waving their limbs and doing leisurely morning exercises, while others set up a chess stand and played a game of chess with their friends. In addition to the undulating chirping of cicadas, the cries of babies, the shouts of hawkers, and the sound of people reading in the corridor also gradually merged with the morning breeze, mixing with the noise of the city from all directions, forming a unique symphony that belonged to the era of the tube-shaped apartment. This scene, which was full of life, made Roland feel particularly nostalgic. Just then, a woman ran along the alley. The chopsticks in Roland's hand trembled subconsciously. It was Garcia Wimbledon. She was wearing a light sportswear, revealing her snow-white thighs. Her gray hair was tied up on top of her head, and there was a towel hanging around her neck. Sweat soaked her collar, and fine beads of sweat could also be seen on her arms. Apparently, she had been running for a long time. What surprised him was that the people in the alley all turned their gazes to her at the same time. Many of them even whistled, looking especially excited, as if they had seen a celebrity. Garcia ignored them and kept running. She passed through the alley like the wind, and finally disappeared at the entrance of the apartment building. "It's that Garcia," someone in the noodle shop exclaimed. "Am I right? If you get up early, you can see her. As long as the weather is good, she will run here for an hour every day. It's the first time I've met a character from TV. She looks much better than she does on TV." By the way, Garcia has an important match recently, right? No matter what, I support her. I hope she can win in the end. Nonsense, she's a genius. Roland was greatly surprised by the discussions around him. Why did he feel that the residents here were very familiar with Garcia? What was the competition? Was she a rising star in the sports world? While the boss was wiping the table, he drank the last mouthful of soup, took out his wallet and asked, "Why, is that woman famous?" The owner looked at him in surprise. "You don't live here, do you? Everyone on Tongzi Street knows Miss Garcia." "I just moved here not long ago." Roland was even more curious. "What does she do?" "She's a martial artist." He almost spat out his saliva. Cough cough. "What? Hey, you'll know when you watch TV. She's the most famous person in this area. It's also because she lives here that we can live here." "Why?" The owner pointed behind Roland. "Look over there." He looked back. He hadn't noticed it before, but now he realized that there was a big demolition painted on the wall of the shop opposite the alley. Demolition? Yes, the development company has long wanted to demolish this place and build a new skyscraper. They said that Tongzi Street was too old and unsightly in the bustling city. Bullshit. This is a cultural relic building. The owner sighed as he searched for the change. Those people want to move us to the suburbs. If Garcia hadn't exposed this on TV and won the support of many people, the developers would have started to drive us away. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. That's really a bit too much. That's why we all support Miss Garcia. The owner smiled and slapped the change into his hand. Since you're a member of Tongzi Street, sooner or later you'll be her supporter. Although the dream world would use some unimaginable power to piece together some obviously inconsistent fragments, this was too inconceivable. What was a martial artist? A new event in the Olympic Games? And demolishing the apartment of souls? This place was connected to the door to the memory fragments, and the creator lived here. So it was thanks to Third Sister that he could live here? With mixed feelings, Roland returned to room 0825. Zero happened to walk out of the bedroom with sleepy eyes. Her hair was messy, and her dress was wrinkled. One side of her collar had slipped down, revealing half of her shoulder. "Uncle, you're up? I'll go make breakfast now." "There's no need. I've already eaten. I also brought you something to eat." Roland put the omelets, shumai, and milk on the table, and then turned on the TV. The little girl walked down from the table with a puzzled look. "Why are you getting up so early now?" "I said I found a job, so I can't sleep in anymore. Your family sent me living expenses, and the company also gave me my first salary. I don't have to worry about money for the time being." "You have to use it sparingly. Who knows how long you can last? Besides, there's still food in the fridge." Having said that, Zero quickly finished the breakfast. "By the way, do you know Garcia?" "Of course. Sister Garcia is a genius." Zero curled her lips and said, "She joined the Combat Association at the age of 20. I heard that she has never lost in the preliminaries. Everyone in the class regards her as their idol, but I think it's boring for them to fight on the stage. Not to mention why Garcia was called a sister and he was called an uncle. According to the little girl, these martial artists had formed an organization." "Are there many martial artists?" "There are only a few." Zero glanced at him. "Uncle, don't even think about it. Not everyone has this talent. Only those who have awakened the force of nature can walk on this path. Moreover, awakening is only the entry requirement. Without perseverance, one will only become a puppet of power and bring a lot of trouble to everyone." How do you know so much?" "Our teacher said so. He also said that if you have time to fantasize about becoming a martial artist, you should do more exercises and strive to be a useful person in society." After washing up in the bathroom, she picked up her school bag and walked to the door. "I have a whole day of classes today. I'm leaving." After Zero left, Roland reached out his hand and felt the strange power in his heart. Could this be her so-called force of nature? He was suddenly interested in the dream world. Becoming a puppet of power, why does it sound a bit like a magic bite? In order to accommodate the devourer's memory, what kind of self-consistent rule did it create? According to the original plan, Roland planned to go to the school library. Chapter 662. For the whole day, Roland watched every channel on TV. There were several programs that explained the martial arts competition. Different from traditional fighting, the arena of the martial arts competition was about half the size of a football field, and there were no referees on the field. The fights between the contestants were also much more intense. It was common for them to break the floor, and the sound of their fists was like muffled thunder, as if there were special effects. In terms of viewing value, it was indeed much more exciting than boxing or free combat. Just the punches hitting the flesh, without the number of rounds or intermission, was enough to excite the audience from beginning to end, not to mention that the two of them often spat out blood, and were covered in cuts and bruises. Roland could not help but frown. As martial artists, this kind of fight was too hard. Weren't they worried that they would not be able to spend the prize money after winning the game? But what he cared about the most were those who were called martial artists. There was no doubt that their physical qualities were far better than ordinary people, and the force of nature did not only increase strength or speed, but also seemed to have special uses. Most of the commentators outside the arena would give these skills a special name, and they would publicize it as the nickname of the martial artists. For example, the man named Hurricane, who could instantly launch a high-speed series of punches, so his nickname was Storm. To be honest, wasn't this the same as showing one's trump card in front of the opponent? But it was still okay. What surprised Roland more was that he actually saw the demon in the game. It was a typical mad demon. It was tall and had burly arms. It didn't wear a mask or iron gloves, and its fangs and 3 fingers were clearly not human. However, the audience turned a blind eye to it. From the commentator's tone, it seemed that they only regarded it as a foreign martial artist. He finally saw the strangeness and power of the dream world. In order to make the demons that Zero devoured reasonable, the dream world even turned them into a minority race living in this world. What about the hybrid demonic beasts? Roland could not help but think of the image of a dragonkin made full of vitality. It was not until his stomach growled that he found that the sun was gradually setting in the west. Roland could not help but frown. Usually Zero would have returned by now. According to the diary, her school was on Zhongshan Road, which was about 3 kilometers away from her apartment. She could get home in 10 minutes by bus. The cram school ended at 5:30 p.m., and it was already 6:15 p.m. Did something happen at school? Roland thought for a moment, and decided to go downstairs to buy something to fill his stomach. After all, it was possible that she was hanging out with her friends. In the summer, the sky wouldn't be completely dark until around 8 o'clock. It wasn't strange to use this time to play in the park or the arcade. He was the landlord, not the nanny. Even if he went to school at this time, he might not be able to see her. It was better not to be a busybody. She was just a little girl. No matter how diligent she was, she would occasionally want to slack off. This time he would make dinner. No, he would bring the takeout. At this moment, the image on the television suddenly flashed, and the martial arts competition turned into a news broadcast room. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have some urgent news. The host held a stack of manuscripts and read with a worried look. There was a robbery at knife point on Zhongshan Road. A bus on Route 29 was hijacked. The traffic police have blocked the intersection. Please don't go out for the time being. We will broadcast the progress of the incident as soon as possible. The image on the television soon changed to the scene of the crime. The road was crowded with onlookers. Everyone was scrambling to stand outside the cordon, showing no intention of evacuating. Wait, isn't this the road that Zero usually takes to school? Roland's heart sank. Was she also kidnapped? This was definitely not good news. As an important part of the dream world, he did not know what would happen if a key character like Zero died. This was also the reason why he did not want to delve into Zero's family. According to his past experience in dreams, the brain's subconscious would act shamelessly when it encountered a problem that it could not make up. As a result, he would wake up suddenly and could not remember the content of the dream. Before he emptied his deep memory, Roland absolutely did not want to end this dream world prematurely, not to mention the many residents in the apartment of souls. If they also had the gate of memory fragments, it would be excellent information for him to learn about the real world. Of course, it was also possible that Zero's existence had no effect on the dream world, but he did not want to take this risk. Thinking of the strange power surging in his body, Roland decided to go to the scene to see if he could be of help. After leaving Tongzi Street, he ran along the busy road. The heat surged and circulated in his body, so he did not feel tired at all. Even though he was running at a high speed, Roland could still easily control every part of his body and nimbly avoid the passers-by on the street. The 3-kilometer distance was shortened by the speed of a 100-meter sprint. In just 8 minutes, he arrived at the scene of the accident. However, to Roland's surprise, as soon as he squeezed into the crowd, he found that the robber had surrendered and was being interviewed in tears, saying that he was just impulsive. The onlookers booed and dispersed as usual. The traffic police were also clearing the roadblocks and preparing to resume traffic. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. Didn't they say that the police would always arrive after the incident was over? Besides, he did not see Zero among the passengers who got off the bus. It seemed that this trip was in vain. As he was about to go back, a faint cry for help came from the narrow alley. Roland was startled and looked into the alley. Although the sun had not completely set, the light had been completely blocked by the tall buildings on both sides. It was pitch black inside, and he could not see anything clearly. Was it an illusion? He slowly walked to the entrance of the alley. After a few minutes, he once again heard a faint cry for help. There was really someone inside. At this time, he should call the police for help. Roland looked back at the bus, only to find that the police had escorted the robber into the police car and were driving away. It was obviously too late to stop them. Should he pretend that he did not hear it? But he clearly felt that something in the alley was attracting him. Since he approached this place, the heat in his body suddenly became intense, as if it was clamoring and cheering, as if it was urging him to move forward. Roland tiptoed into the narrow alley. His eyes quickly adapted to the faint light. He saw a man with his back to him, and there was nothing else around him. "Is it you who is calling for help?" he asked with a frown. The man did not answer. Instead, he turned his head 180 degrees. This strange scene caused Roland to suck in a breath of cold air. However, the more surprising thing was yet to come. Chapter 663. Is this magic power? Roland thought of Nightingale's description of magic power. However, in his eyes, this rotating cyclone was more like a galaxy. The brightest nucleus was in the center, surrounded by several spiral arms revolving around the nucleus. Although it was only the size of a palm, Roland could feel the endless details and surging power contained in it. "Are you a martial fighter?" The man suddenly opened his mouth, and his voice was hoarse as if there was a leak in his throat. "You've got the wrong person." Roland was on high alert. "You're right." The burnt-faced man also turned around, but his head did not move. "You smell sweeter. If you were a girl, I might be interested in your words." Roland looked at the man's possible weak points and asked, "Are you the one who was backfired by the magic?" "No, the force of nature." "Force of nature?" The burnt-faced man snorted disdainfully through his almost ruined nose. "They have no idea where this force comes from, let alone its nature. You say it like you know." Hell, was this still his dream? "I can't tell, but I can feel it. It doesn't belong to this world. It's a gift from the gods." The man grinned. "I thought the robbery would attract 1 or 2 martial artists, but I didn't expect that guy to surrender so quickly. Fortunately, it wasn't in vain. It's also good that I lured you here." Crack! Before the burnt-faced man finished his words, Roland had already started to attack. As the saying went, the one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers the misfortune. Roland could tell from the man's tone that he was a dangerous person. It was not a wise move to wait for the enemy to finish talking. According to Roland's childhood fighting experience, the most important thing was to gain the upper hand by making a show of strength. He swung his fist and punched his opponent's forehead. His speed was as fast as lightning. Considering that his strength had greatly increased, he did not use his full strength in this punch. Even so, he could feel his cheekbone cracking under the fierce punch. The burnt-faced man was directly sent flying. The heat in his body boiled, as if it was rejoicing for this attack. After the man fell to the ground, he rolled twice and crashed into the wall before stopping. Just as he was about to struggle to get up, Roland chased after him without hesitation. This was the dreamscape. His opponent was also not human, at least not an ordinary person. No ordinary person could continue fighting with their cheekbone broken. He neither cried out in pain nor begged for mercy. From this point, it was tantamount to kicking himself out of the human category. Roland felt that his consciousness was extremely clear. Although the surging heat filled his entire body, it didn't make him feel dizzy at all. After gaining the upper hand with a show of strength, the second move was to beat the enemy when they were down. This time he didn't hold back. Without any technique, it was as if he was punching a sandbag. Obviously, the burnt-faced man did not expect such a situation, and could only try his best to resist. However, as Roland's strength increased, his defense quickly lost its effect. His hands, which were used to block, were broken into pieces, and his sternum and ribs were all broken. Every punch was like punching a piece of tofu. The man's hard muscles gradually turned into a puddle of mud. If he were an ordinary person, he would have been killed. "You're so pretentious," Roland cursed as he punched the man. "What's so great about turning your head around? Do you think you're in a horror film?" To be honest, when he first entered the alley, he was really shocked by the burnt-faced man's way of showing up. How could he play tricks in front of the creator of the dreamscape? Why didn't he go to heaven? It's impossible. The burnt-faced man's voice had completely changed. Roland could barely hear what he was saying. "Why can't I use it?" "Use what?" Roland noticed that the cyclone above the burnt-faced man's forehead was spinning slower and slower. He tried to grab it, only to find that it had become solid. "Use this ball of magic power?" "No, don't touch it." Since the burnt-faced man said no, Roland had to do it. He pressed the burnt-faced man's head with one hand, and pulled the cyclone with the other. When the heat flow in his body reached its peak, the cyclone was pulled out by Roland. The burnt-faced man immediately fell silent and collapsed to the ground as if he had lost all his vitality. After falling into Roland's palm, the cyclone changed from crimson to white on the inside and blue on the outside. It looked more like a galaxy now. However, it did not stay in Roland's hand for long. After it started spinning again, the cyclone shot out a beam of dazzling light into the sky, leaving a silver line between the sky and the earth. After a few seconds, the light disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Roland noticed that the warm current in his body had calmed down, and as if he had obtained great satisfaction, he felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction all over his body. He was completely at a loss. Maybe this world was much more complicated than he had imagined. Glancing at the burnt-faced man who was lying on the ground like a dead man, Roland twitched his mouth and left the alley. It was already dark when he returned to the tube-shaped apartment on the side of the long street. The light in the corridor attracted a swarm of flying insects, which made annoying buzzing sounds. He took out the key and inserted it into the keyhole under the dim light. Before he could turn the key, he heard hurried footsteps coming from the other side of the door. The door was opened, and Zero frowned. Her eyes were filled with dissatisfaction, but there was also a trace of anxiety. "Where have you been? Where have you been?" The two asked almost at the same time. "The cram school has an extra class because the teacher will come to check tomorrow. The school is closed for the day. I went to find you." "Find me?" the little girl asked doubtfully. "Yes, you didn't come back on time." Roland laughed. He rubbed her head and walked into the room. 3 dishes and a soup were placed on the table, but the bowls and chopsticks were still clean. Obviously, Zero had been waiting for him. That was why she came here as soon as she heard the sound of the lock being unlocked. "Let's eat." Roland sat at the table. "I'm starving. Are you worried that I'll be cheated by strangers?" She glared at him. "I'm not a child anymore. Just wait for me at home next time." Roland could not help but roll his eyes. Are junior high school students so sensible now? He remembered that when he was at this age, he was crazier than a dog. When he had spare change, he would go to the game hall. When he had no change, he would go to the back mountain to catch cockroaches. He would not go home until it was dark. Compared to this little girl, it was like heaven and earth. An inexplicable sense of guilt welled up in his heart. By the way, you have a holiday tomorrow, right? Yes. Although Zero still looked a little angry, her expression had softened a lot. What's wrong? Accompany me to the library, Roland said while eating. I'll buy you something. Buy something. Chapter 664. After 2 days in the dream world, the gray slate roof of the castle appeared in front of Roland again. He stretched out his hand, repeatedly clenched his fist and opened it. Except for the strange heat flow, his every move was exactly the same as the one in the dream world. If he could not escape by falling, he would not be able to distinguish the illusion from reality. Could the brain really simulate to this extent? Roland could not help but feel doubtful, especially the cluster of stars that looked like a magic cyclone. He had never seen the real appearance of magic power. If the force of nature was based on magic power, it should be blurred in the dream world, coupled with the weird burnt-faced man and the heat flow that resonated with the cluster of stars. He suddenly became uncertain about his previous inference. He felt that his mind could not contain such a complicated and huge dream world. If the dream world was not in the subconscious, where would it be? After racking his brains for a long time, Roland still could not come up with a satisfactory answer. He shook his head and decided to put these things aside for the time being. Since he could not figure it out, he might as well stop thinking about it. It was more important to get down to business. After visiting the library with Zero, he borrowed a lot of useful design materials. Even if he just casually flipped through some of them, he could reproduce all of them. One of the books even included the ratio and properties of some commonly used alloys, which would undoubtedly save a lot of time for Anna and Lucia to test. In this way, he could find a way to manufacture the third-generation machine tools with higher precision. Of course, the first batch of workers would probably have to be personally supervised by him. Roland was particularly excited when he thought that people from all over Grey Castle were continuously gathering in the western region, and those who had already settled down were passing the universal education examination and going to work in batches. This was a process that was constantly accelerating, and he had now made a breakthrough. When he unified Grey Castle next year, Neverwinter might have the opportunity to touch the threshold of the Industrial Age. Once it entered the Industrial Age, there would definitely be earth-shaking changes in this territory. In the afternoon, Car Van Bate, the head of the Ministry of Construction, brought the news of the completion of Route 67. Compared with Kingdom Avenue, the construction of this road was much faster. In addition to the shorter distance, the proficiency of the workers was also a key point. According to the previous promise, this batch of workers trained by the Ministry of Construction had all belonged to the border area. Your Majesty, if you don't have a new road construction plan, I plan to send all of them to the residential construction project, Carr said. Although it will increase their salary, there is a shortage of residential areas in Neverwinter. Roland was also aware of this situation. There was a total of nearly 5,000 construction workers, and half of them were busy building new residential areas. The reason was to accommodate the large number of people that the city hall had roped in from all over. In just 1 year, the original town had at least tripled in size. And this did not include the newly reclaimed farmland south of the Redwater River. The roads will never be finished. He spread out the map of the border region and pointed to the North Slope Mountain. I plan to build a railway from the mine to the docks to carry the coal from the west. Isn't there a road here? Carr suddenly paused. Did you just say railway? That's right, a railway, or rather a railway track. Roland nodded and said, it's similar to the railway transportation system in the mine, but it's all made of steel. I see. He thought for a moment and said, but it won't require many people. If it was just to pave a narrow hardened road, it would indeed not require many people. Roland smiled and did not say anything. In fact, he knew that the director of the Ministry of Construction did not understand at all. In his mind, he was not thinking about the simple transportation method that relied on hemp ropes, steam engines, or horses to transport coal. What he wanted was a train. a means of transportation that had brought earth-shaking changes to land transportation since its invention. And this short-distance railway was an experiment. The principle of the steam train was not complicated, but the railway system was huge. Roland did not know how many years of experiments and improvements had been made from the invention to the practical application of the train and its supporting equipment, but he was sure it was a long process. Fortunately, these things could be found in the dream world. As the symbol of industry, he had been deeply fascinated by these huge machines. No matter how heavy they were, they always spouted white mist and steadily traveled between the jungle and the mountains. The pitch-black connecting rods drove the wheels to rotate, making rhythmic clanging sounds and shortening the vast land to an acceptable range. Later, no matter how the power changed, its essence remained the same. Of course, it was not enough to have hardware facilities. The train needed a large number of railway workers to drive it, which was undoubtedly more complicated than operating a steam engine or a machine tool. According to Roland's plan, the railway connecting the North Slope Mountain and the dock was not only a technical experiment, but also a training base for the first generation of railway workers. "Let's use 200 people to pave the roadbed first," Roland said decisively. "The route will go in the direction of the misty forest and build it outside the second city wall." Carr looked worried and said, "But Your Majesty, your railway will be exposed to demonic beasts. They're not interested in steel, and I don't intend to finish it before the months of demons," he said carelessly. "As for next year, we won't hide behind this mud wall anymore. Don't you think the border area is getting more and more crowded?" "You mean, we'll expand to the barbarian land. The resources there are no less than those in Grey Castle." Roland pointed to the vast fertile land in the northwest of the impassable mountain range. "If we want to fight against the demons, we can't just rely on a thin mud wall. If the Battle of Divine Will broke out and the demons put the third obelisk in Tequila, the outpost might be close to the foot of the impassable mountain range. Defending the gap in the western region was almost certain to fail. The Witch Cooperation Association could enter the barbarian land by following the mountain path, and they could also sneak into the hinterland of Grey Castle in the same way. Even if they did not take the mountain path, it would be difficult for a group of flying devil beasts to circle around the mountain and come to the back every day. Only by turning the impassable mountain range into a city wall could the safety of the kingdom be protected. If the Longsong cannons were set up on each mountain, Roland's new town would be within the range of their shooting range. There was no river connecting this area to the interior, so the only way to quickly transport resources to the barbarian land was to rely on the railway. "The planning of the future defensive line is a big project, but I believe you can do it." Incorporating the impassable mountain range into the kingdom's territory sounded like a dream to any stonemason. If they could build such a city, they would definitely leave their name in history. Chapter 665. "In addition, I plan to build a landmark in Neverwinter," Roland continued. "A landmark?" Carr quickly recovered from his excitement and asked, "Do you mean an eye-catching building like a monument or a clock tower?" "You can also call it a spectacle." Roland nodded and then shook his head and said, "But I'm not going to build a useless landmark." After the war with the Church, the First Army suffered the heaviest loss. Although Iron Axe reported that the morale of the army was not affected, the families were inevitably saddened by the casualties. In order to strengthen the confidence of his subjects, especially those from foreign lands, Roland thought of a spectacle that could make people gasp in amazement. Of course, some of the spectacles in history were built to satisfy the selfish desires of the rulers, and did not benefit the builders. Even if it could show the strength of the country, Roland would not do it. "I plan to build a residential building on the south bank of the Redwater River, behind the industrial park." Carr did not speak. He obviously realized that the building would not be ordinary. Roland was very satisfied with Roland's calmness and said, "It will have about 15 floors. According to the calculation of 3.5 meters per floor, the height of the building will be over 50 meters. In other words, it will be close to the height of 4 city walls of the old King's City. That's the most magnificent project you've ever been involved in, right?" Roland gasped and said, "Your Majesty, it can be regarded as a Tower of Babel." Not really. It's just an ordinary high-rise building. Roland smiled and said, but in this era, it's not excessive to regard it as a landmark. The height of 15 floors meant that it would be much higher than the castle. As long as one entered the territory of Neverwinter, he could see the high-rise building at a glance. It could not only symbolize the strength of Neverwinter, but also make up for the current housing shortage. After all, the floor area ratio of high-rise houses was much higher than that of bungalows, which was why there were more and more skyscrapers in later generations. Can a house really be built so high? Carr looked a little doubtful. For concrete, this is far from the limit. Roland thought for a moment and said, I'll guide you to finish it. Although different professions were worlds apart, mechanics and structural principles were still universal. Before coming up with this idea, he had considered many aspects. The height might seem amazing, but it was not. For example, the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was built more than 2,000 years before Christ, was more than 140 meters tall, and it was built purely of stone. China also had wooden pagodas that were more than 130 meters tall. As long as the support was thick enough, the height was not a problem. In the later generations, in order to save materials, the volume of the wall columns would be reduced as much as possible under the conditions of stability. Currently, Neverwinter had a surplus of cement production, so it was a good choice to use it to build a concrete tower. In addition, if the tower was designed with multiple podiums, although it would take up some extra land, it would greatly enhance the stability of the structure and reduce the construction difficulty. As the saying goes, if the structure is unstable, add more columns. If the level is not high enough, add steel bars. As long as the foundation is solid enough, it will be difficult for it to collapse. The last difficulty was the pouring of the concrete. Roland had already thought about this, which was to let Maggie carry the hummingbird into the air, and the hummingbird carry the iron cans to pour the concrete from the air. The efficiency was not much lower than that of the pump truck. Carr had the experience of building the Witch Building before. It was also a concrete structure, but this time, the scale was just a little larger. And when the time came, the bamboo and iron wires would be replaced with real steel bars. With the technical support of the Witch Union, he was full of confidence. Time's up. Put down your pens, Scroll said, knocking on the table. Phew. Evelyn breathed a long sigh of relief. In this way, the second semester in Border Town, no, in Neverwinter, was over. In this year, she had finally caught up with everyone's progress and participated in the final exam together. She put away the charcoal and looked around. Anna was still not present. According to Sister Vendi, she had reached a mysterious realm. Ordinary people who saw the books she read would only feel dizzy and drowsy, as if the magic of the whole body had been exhausted. Candle was also looking at her. When their eyes met, she gave her a thumbs up. It seemed that she had done a good job. Nightingale, who was sitting in the last row, still looked sad. Since there was no reading and writing test, her grades had plummeted, which made Evelyn quite puzzled. As far as she knew, Nightingale came from a noble background and received education earlier than most people, so she should not be so hard on her studies. After thinking about it, she could only think that it was because Nightingale's ability was too important. She was busy all day dealing with things for His Majesty, which delayed her studies. After all, Nightingale was a combat witch who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Lady Ashes. If she was on Sleeping Island, she would be an existence that Evelyn could only look up to. For example, Agatha, Lucia, and Lily, who were in the first row, always got high scores easily. Learning seemed to be an innate ability for them, especially Miss Agatha, who now had a tendency to get close to Anna and Tilly. In addition, she was also a combat witch, which made Evelyn very envious. Judging from the expressions of the few at the end, it could be guessed that Honey, Hummingbird, and Echo would be the ones who would take on the role. Of course, this did not include Paper and Summer, who had just joined the alliance. They still had not caught up with the progress, and could only be taught by Teacher Scroll for the time being. But what excited Evelyn the most was Maggie. Looking at the dumbfounded little girl, she could not help but want to laugh. There were no multiple-choice questions in this exam. Since the results of the last final exam came out, Evelyn had been brooding over it. She thought that the goal she had set was very realistic, but she did not expect that she would still lose to Maggie by 1 point. For this reason, she even looked for Scroll to see if she had calculated the score incorrectly, only to find that Maggie's multiple-choice questions had an amazingly high accuracy rate, and she had lost indisputably. In the following year, Evelyn spent most of her free time studying. Her ability was very fast. She usually only needed to go to the winery 2 or 3 times a week, and each time, she would be able to release all her magic power in less than a quarter of an hour. Even after she opened a bar, it did not take too much time. She had never played with the 3 card players, and when she was in her free time, she would always open the exercise book to consolidate what she had learned in the evening. Even when it came to collecting her favorite perfume, Evelyn had restrained herself quite a bit. Only when a new scent of perfume was placed on the shelves would Evelyn invite Candle to stroll around the convenience market, all for the sake of achieving the goal she had set for herself. Chapter 666. 3 days later, Evelyn knew her final results. Out of the 150 marks on the comprehensive test paper, she got a delightful 113 points. According to her usual practice, this could be regarded as a superb performance. Since Scroll went to the Longsong area with His Majesty to check the work, it was Sister Vendi who informed her of the results. She also specially patted Evelyn on the shoulder and encouraged her with a smile. Good answer. Her Highness Tilly will be very happy to know this. Keep it up. I will continue to work hard. Evelyn nodded vigorously and turned back to find Candle. How many points did you get? 91 points. I finally passed, Candle said with a smile. Looking at your happy expression, you must have done very well, right? Yes. She couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth. 113. Really? This score is probably close to that of Wuxia and the others. Candle said in surprise. Do you want me to ask for you? No, they must have done better. Evelyn waved her hand. I only need to know Maggie's score. Perhaps the next target could be Lily or Wuxia, she thought to herself. Her ability was indeed very poor, but it was inborn and she couldn't change it. Learning required hard work to make progress, and even an ordinary person could become charming. She didn't want to lose to anyone. She also wanted to be as knowledgeable and talented as His Majesty. After class, Evelyn found Maggie, but the other's answer made her unable to believe her ears. Coo. I got 117 points. Coo. How could this be? She was stunned and didn't come back to her senses until a long time after Maggie left. How is this possible? Did Scroll calculate her results wrongly? For a moment, Evelyn thought she heard her own voice. She blinked her eyes and found that the one who spoke was Mystery Moon, who happened to hear it and was also puzzled. What's impossible? Lily rolled her eyes at her. Don't doubt others just because you did poorly, okay? But I was sitting right in front of her, Mystery Moon argued. When I collected the papers, I saw that she had drawn honey jerky on a large blank space. Are you sure? Lily frowned. I guarantee it with my electromagnetic power. Huh. That's not convincing at all. She shrugged and turned to leave, but Mystery Moon pulled her back. Wait, I'm telling the truth. Why don't we investigate it? Not interested. Lily curled her lips. If you really find it strange, you can ask Scroll when she comes back. If that's the case, then there's no point in exploring. Mystery Moon looked as if she was eager to see the world in chaos. Evelyn, let us help you find out the truth. Don't count me in. What happened? Candlelight also came up to them. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before she confessed her confusion. Well, if you want to investigate, how should I do it? Candle touched Evelyn's head. Teacher Scroll will probably be gone for several days, right? Now that His Majesty and Nightingale are not here, I won't let you sneak into the office. Lily glared at Mystery Moon. Don't think I don't know what you want to do. Steal the papers? I'm not that stupid. Mystery Moon wagged her finger. I just need to find the place where Scroll reads the papers. You mean? Candle's eyes lit up. Just ask Summer, she said, smirking. Evelyn immediately understood Mystery Moon's plan. If Summer played back the illusion of scroll grading Maggie, they could indeed find the answer to the question. But Teacher Scroll usually reads the papers in City Hall. Isn't it inappropriate for us to go there? What's wrong with that? Everyone in Neverwinter can come and go freely. Of course we can also go there, Mystery Moon shouted. It's not His Majesty's office, so someone doesn't have to worry about it. I have to remind you. Lily was unmoved. Ordinary people can only enter the lobby of City Hall. The office of the Ministry of Education is on the second floor. Do you think those officials will let us go there at will? This. Mystery Moon was suddenly at a loss for words. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Evelyn wanted to retreat. She didn't want to cause trouble for everyone. I'll wait a few more days. No, I have a way that might solve it. Candle touched her chin and said. Candle's method was very simple. She just wanted to bring Nana along. According to her, since she had already called Summer, it didn't matter if she brought one more. And it turned out that this method was indeed effective. Evelyn was stunned by Nana Pine's popularity. The next day, as soon as she entered the City Hall, she was warmly greeted by everyone and no one stopped her from going anywhere. Perhaps because the image of the little angel was too deeply rooted in people's hearts, or because her father was a noble personally rewarded by His Majesty, she was quite famous in the border area. In short, they entered the office of the Ministry of Education effortlessly. The room was empty. Few teachers would come here unless there was a meeting. We're in. Mystery Moon said excitedly. Hurry up and start backtracking. Is this really okay? Summer said a little uneasily. This is a place that only officials can come. Officials are not rare. Hummingbird is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Construction. Mystery Moon patted her chest. Don't worry. As long as we don't tell anyone, Scroll definitely won't mind us coming to her office. If the truth is that you're lying, I promise I'll tell Scroll. Lily snorted coldly. Didn't you say you wouldn't come? Ahem. I'm here to keep an eye on you to prevent you from making a big mistake, understand? Looking at the two arguing, Evelyn suddenly felt that her decision might have been a mistake. In the end, it was Candle who persuaded Summer. When the illusion appeared in the office, everyone held their breath. It was obvious that Scroll's marking time was between the end of the exam and the day she went to Longsong Academy. She quickly found the scene with the help of the fast playback. Everyone squeezed behind Scroll at the same time. As long as the time was not too long, Summer could maintain the illusion for half an hour. After a while, Evelyn saw Maggie's paper. See, I didn't lie. Mystery Moon shouted. Lily could not help but frown. There was indeed a large blank space on the paper. Except for the relatively easy fill-in-the-blank questions and question-and-answer questions, there was almost no word written on the latter part of the paper that involved calculation. Moreover, there were pictures of barbecued meat under some of the questions. Even Scroll could not help but shake her head. Obviously, this answer paper could not have scored 117 points. Chapter 667. Scroll quickly scanned through the entire test paper, and then wrote down the total score of the 3 subjects at the head of the paper. 17 points. It was a full 100 points lower than the final result. Well, it seems that the problem lies with Maggie? Nana tilted her head. Hey, is that the result? Mystery Moon was greatly disappointed. Isn't it Scroll who deliberately protected Maggie and used the condition of getting a high score in exchange for honey barbecue? Ouch. Lily slapped the back of her head. Shut up. Do you want to continue reading? Summer asked timidly. Let's leave here as soon as possible. It would be terrible if we were discovered. Wait a little longer, Candle said in a low voice. Maybe there was something wrong when copying. No, I already know the result. That's enough. Evelyn shook her head. If it was written in the original way, it was indeed possible to confuse the tightly arranged numbers. However, in the universal education implemented by His Majesty, the numbers had been replaced with simple and easy-to-remember characters, so the probability of making a mistake was too small. I think Maggie flew in from the window. The jerky stop. Mystery Moon covered her head. Don't do it. I won't say anything. Scroll checked all the test papers and began to copy the scores until everyone's scores were gathered on a table. The score in Maggie's column was still 17 points. It seems that it's really not Teacher Scroll's problem, Candle sighed softly. Can we go now? Summer said anxiously. Evelyn was about to answer when Scroll suddenly stood up and looked in the direction of the door. The 6 people immediately followed her gaze, and then noticed that the door had been opened and a City Hall apprentice appeared in front of the office. What are they talking about? Mystery Moon asked. The illusion had no voice, so everyone could only judge their conversation by the movement of their lips. It seems that Lady Scroll, His Excellency Barov, is looking for you? Then Scroll nodded and followed the apprentice out of the office. At the moment when the door was closed, perhaps because of the airflow, a cold wind suddenly rolled up in the room, blowing up all the test papers and scattering them messily on the floor. Ah, the window. Lily was startled. Evelyn also saw it. The window that was originally closed was now opened a small gap. It could only be said that Scroll didn't close the window properly, and the airflow generated by the opening and closing of the door caused the window to crack open. As the autumn wind blew, the window swayed back and forth, opening wider and wider. Not long after, another strong gust of wind smashed it back into the window frame. Although no sound could be heard, it was obvious that the force of the impact was not small from the way the glass shook. A jaw-dropping scene occurred. A gust of wind swept through the office again, scraping the pen holder onto the table. The quill knocked against the mouth of the ink bottle and flew up, landing right on the result sheet. The tip of the quill was the first to touch the ground. It brushed past the grid with Maggie's score, leaving a short vertical line. The original score of 17 became a 3-digit 117. Someone probably heard the loud noise coming from the office, for the door was pushed open again. The apprentice who left with the notice first looked around, and then walked in surprise. She went to the window, closed all the windows, and then squatted down to tidy up the office for Scroll. She didn't leave until all the documents were rearranged and neatly placed on the desk. Satisfied, she tiptoed away. Is that what happened? Evelyn and Candle looked at each other. It was not a mistake in the book, nor was it Maggie's deliberate deceit, but was caused by an accidental wind? Evelyn could already guess what happened next. Scroll received His Majesty's order to go to Longsong and handed the result sheet to Vendi. Vendi wasn't the examiner, so even if she was confused about Maggie's score, she wouldn't question Scroll's judgment. Under Mystery Moon's persistence, the truth has finally been discovered. Mystery Moon looked up and said, "The culprit is Teacher Scroll." "It's the wind," Lily said, gnashing her teeth. But if Scroll had closed the window, the wind wouldn't have messed up the papers and blown away the quill, right? How could you say that? No, Nana said thoughtfully. If that's the case, it should be His Highness Roland's fault. He built the new city hall here. Not only did he expand it, but he also added 2 more floors. Without this extra second floor, Scroll couldn't have judged the papers here. You're right, so the culprit is His Majesty? That's enough. Excuse me. Can I finish now? Summer looked so anxious that she was about to cry. Sorry, it's enough. Evelyn patted her on the shoulder. Thank you. Let's go. Hey, are we leaving now? Maybe we can find the papers for the next quiz in Scroll's office? Mystery Moon stopped in front of everyone. This is your real purpose of coming here. Lily rushed forward. I won't let you mess around. I was just saying. In the end, the investigation ended like a farce. After saying goodbye to Candle, Evelyn returned to the witch building alone. Although the truth had come to light, she could not calm down at all. For some reason, the flying paper and the falling quill kept appearing in her mind. Their trajectories were irregular, but at the last moment, they formed a clever and perfect result. Not only the paper and the quill, but also the airflow caused by the door and the time taken by the apprentices in and out all played a part in the result. Without any of these conditions, the score could not be changed. However, these conditions were unconscious and chaotic. So it was the same for bartending. When adding various ingredients to the wine, one could not taste each taste in turn when tasting it. They fused and influenced each other in the wine. Every taste that could be accepted by people needed countless attempts. And sometimes a coincidental combination would create a unique taste. Evelyn could not help but think of the microscopic spheres that His Majesty had mentioned. They were always making disorderly disturbances, each seemingly unrelated, but as a whole, they could show wonderful characteristics. She closed her eyes and felt that something was about to come out of her heart. The world was full of chaos, but the result was hidden in the chaos. It was as if it was predestined. Evelyn suddenly opened her eyes and reached for the glass of water on the table. The cold water that had been left for a day rippled, and then the color changed, as if a drop of paint had been poured into it. The water gradually turned into an orange-red color, and a fragrance that she had never smelled before floated into her nose. She hesitated for a moment, and then stuck out her tongue to lick it. An indescribable sweetness suddenly filled the tip of her tongue. It was slightly astringent, but the rich and mellow sweetness was incomparable to any kind of drink. It was like a mixture of juice and milk, but also like a mixture of tea and honey. Evelyn could not accurately describe the taste, but she was sure of one thing. Chapter 668. A week later, Roland returned to the border area from Longsong's stronghold. As soon as he entered the castle, he received 2 pieces of good news. The first one was from Berov. Your Majesty, the astrologers from the Old King's City have arrived in Neverwinter 3 days ago. Together with craftsmen, apprentices, and their families, there are 312 of them. I've arranged for the 9 astrologers to stay in the Foreign Affairs building, and the others to stay in the reception area. They're finally here. Roland thought for a moment and then ordered, hold a welcome banquet in the square in the evening. I want to let the people know that there's another school of sages in Neverwinter. Like alchemy, astrology had a high reputation among the people. Generally, only the King's City would have both of them. Now that all the Astrology Association had gone to the Western region, it was easier for people to accept Neverwinter as the new King's City. However, Roland did not need this school of astrology. What he really wanted was the astrologers' ability to calculate. They were definitely at the forefront of mathematics in this era. Whether it was calculating the calendar or estimating the orbit of the stars, they needed a lot of calculation. With the relevant knowledge of intermediate and advanced mathematics, they would undoubtedly be able to further improve their original foundation. He planned to set up a school of mathematics, so that these people could devote all their time to calculation except for the occasional observation of the star of extinction. In this era without computers, it was the most efficient choice for many scholars to complete some complex calculations together. Whether it was laying rails, building large ships, installing Longsong cannons on the mountains, or writing shooting manuals, he would need their help. Yes, Your Majesty. Berov nodded and then asked, may I know about your trip to Longsong? There were a lot of problems. Facing the director of City Hall, Roland did not need to hide it. The second-level City Hall of Longsong has been found to have malfeasance and corruption. Scroll found a lot of falsified accounts. Even among the batch of officials transferred from the border area, she caught 2 embezzlers. Hearing this, Berov could not help but swallow his saliva. Are they my disciples? Roland was amused by the other party's cautious look. He shook his head helplessly. Even if they are your disciples, I won't blame you. Don't worry. Your Majesty is wise, said Berov hastily. Then are they the subjects of the old town? Yes, the second batch of graduates passed the examination and entered the City Hall. Then they were transferred to the Longsong area along with the whole team. Roland sighed. It's been less than a year since then. At present, City Hall had trained a group of semi-leaders. One of them was the Longsong district, which was almost completely copied from Border Town. With the addition of the local honeysuckle Perot, the elk wren, and some minor nobles, the Longsong district had everything, except for the slightly smaller number of people. The other half was the batch that went to Fallen Dragon Bounty. Besides assisting Countess Spear to maintain the political situation, their secondary task was to try to establish the framework of a secondary city hall. As the Northern Region scholars brought back by Edith Kant participated in the administrative study of the city hall, Roland might be able to find another half in a short period of time. He had already reserved this group of people for the southernmost region. The most scarce talent was undoubtedly the local officials who could carry out his edict. Without them as the foundation, even if Roland conquered the entire Grey Castle, he would not be able to quickly centralize the kingdom's resources. The local government was an important part of the centralization of power. He could use the witches to quickly advance the level of science and technology, but he could not create a large number of middle-level and grassroots officials out of thin air. Those feudal nobles would never obey his orders obediently. In the eyes of the feudalists, the only important thing was the land they occupied. Therefore, every person with administrative experience was a rare treasure. Now that he had lost several people, Roland naturally felt a little depressed. Although the corruption of the organization was inevitable, he thought it could at least last for more than a decade. He did not expect such a problem to occur in just 1 year. And the two greedy people were both civilians, which in a way proved that once they had power, they might be more likely to lose their way than the nobles. Those who violated the law, they were punished severely. Roland spread out his hands and said, "To set an example for others. This should be able to last for a few more years." With the ability of Nightingale and Scroll, it was not a problem to temporarily maintain the integrity of the organization. But he also knew that this could not continue. Otherwise the witches would be easily pushed to the teeth of the storm again. And the next enemy would come from within. "Tomorrow, gather all the people in the city hall in the castle hall. I will personally hold a short meeting with them to talk about the importance of discipline and responsibility." Of course, there would also be rewards and punishments. In the face of the high pressure and broad prospects of the battle of divine will, they should know how to choose. "Yes, Your Majesty." Berev bowed. Looking at the back of the old director, Roland was satisfied and took a sip of tea. He knew the purpose of Berev's loyalty: to pursue power while enjoying the satisfaction of power itself, and at the same time, to better use power. Berev was undoubtedly a person who was very suitable for the new political system. Perhaps in the future, in the city hall, only he could compete with Edith. The second piece of good news came from Vendi. Evelyn's ability has evolved. Roland was slightly surprised when he heard the news. In his impression, Evelyn's various magic indicators were very balanced and did not seem outstanding. He did not expect that she would become the first witch on Sleeping Island to evolve, which was really a surprise to him. Yes, Agatha has confirmed this, but... Vendi smiled bitterly. After the evolution, her ability is too strange. I don't know how to describe it. Bring her to see me in the office, he said with great interest. Evelyn walked into the third floor of the castle with several glass bottles. Roland noticed that each bottle contained a liquid of different colors. Her magic power looks like a gray ball. Nightingale's voice came into his ears. But the shape is not fixed. What about the total magic power? The degree of growth is good. Currently it's between Leaf and Agatha. Roland nodded and looked at Evelyn. What's in it? The drinks I created with my ability these days. Her tone seemed a little depressed. They taste different, and I can't control the final result. The only thing in common is that they can all be drunk. Drinks. Roland's curiosity could not be suppressed. He found a few teacups and poured himself a cup of each. When he took the first sip of the light blue drink, he tasted an indescribable delicacy. It was like a mixture of many kinds of fruit juices, with a trace of refreshing coldness. Chapter 669. The next few drinks were an eye-opener for Roland. Some were like coffee, slightly bitter but emitting a strong fragrance. Some were like soup, delicious and warm the stomach. The most unique one was one that he could not even remember. If he had to name it, he could only make up a word to name it. Fire dragon wine. It was not the wine made from dragon fruit, but the dragon flame in his imagination. When it entered the mouth, there was a burning sensation, as if lava had rushed into the mouth. Then there was a scorching smell, as if his tongue had been roasted. Finally, there was a juicy fruit fragrance, mixed with the slightly intoxicating taste of wine. The longer it was kept in the mouth, the longer the aftertaste. If it was in winter, it would definitely be an irresistible drink. Probably seeing Roland's intoxicated expression, Nightingale could not help but show herself, licking her lips and asking, "Your Majesty, is it really that good? Try it and you'll know." Roland handed the cup to her. Soon, Nightingale hummed with satisfaction, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "I've tasted it." Vendi showed a sympathetic expression. "Its taste is really irresistible." After drinking all the fire dragon wine, Roland burped unwillingly. "Is there any more of this drink?" Evelyn shook her head. "I can't repeat the result last time. The new ability is completely irregular. Can't repeat it." Roland was a little startled. After Vendi explained the test in detail, he finally understood why she was distressed. This ability could turn water, wine or other liquids into drinks, but it could not control which kind of drink it was. In other words, the finished product was different every time. It consumed much more magic power than the conversion of alcohol. It could only be used once a day, and the amount it could convert was quite limited, almost equal to the capacity of a wine barrel. Roland had seen the round wooden barrels in taverns, which could store about 1 cubic meter of wine. So far, Evelyn had used the new ability 5 times, and got 5 different drinks with different flavors. At the thought of not knowing when he could drink the fire dragon wine again, or maybe never again, Roland felt full of regret. This was probably the reason why Evelyn was disappointed. For witches, the High Awakening could be regarded as a new life, and even had the opportunity to jump from a non-combat witch to a combat witch. Although he repeatedly stressed that every witch's ability had great potential, Evelyn, who came from Sleeping Island, still could not completely change her mind. Roland knew that she had always thought that her brewing skills were terrible. Now that she had finally evolved, her new ability didn't change fundamentally. She just changed from wine to more drinks, and she couldn't even control the result. She was even more depressed. He did not have a good solution to this. It usually took time to change stereotypes. When a large number of assistant witches shone in Neverwinter, the witch's mentality would naturally change. But he absolutely did not think that this ability was useless. The Age of Great Voyages, which started in the pursuit of spices, and the Silk Road, which flourished because of the trade of porcelain and silk, all proved that people had a demand and desire for luxury goods. These drinks were indisputable luxury goods. The exquisite taste, the unique feeling, and the beauty that added a touch of brilliance to this boring world. No matter which era it was in, it would be sought after by people. And it almost cost nothing. For example, if the fire dragon wine was sold to the fjords and other kingdoms, it would not be strange to exchange it for the same weight of a golden dragon. There would always be some rich merchants and nobles who had too much money to spend who would pay for it. As for the war caused by greed for luxury goods, they should be thankful that Roland did not rob them. Robbing Neverwinter was no different from committing suicide. Evelyn was undoubtedly a moving mountain of gold. Moreover, trade was not the only use of the drinks. Historical experience had taught him that things that were widely loved by the masses could often play a role in spreading culture and ideas. In addition, in the arduous war years, if the soldiers fighting on the outer edge of the impassable mountain range could drink a bag of drinks transported from Neverwinter to the front, it would definitely greatly boost the morale of the army. It could strengthen the unity of the people and stabilize the confidence of the people to fight against the battle of divine will. In the future, in addition to alcohol, no high alcohol conversion, I'll specially build a drink storage for you, Roland said decisively. You can use all the remaining magic power on the new ability. I believe that everyone who drinks it will be fascinated by it. Okay. Your Majesty. Although Evelyn agreed, she still looked a little doubtful. She did not realize her own value. But Roland did not say what he thought in his heart. He knew that as long as he continued to do it, Evelyn would see the changes brought about by her chaotic power sooner or later. As for their names, let's call them chaos drinks, Roland said with a smile. After the welcome banquet in the evening, Astrologer of Dispersion Star walked into the study of His Majesty. He had served 3 Wimbledon kings. Including Roland Wimbledon, Dispersion Star was the 4th king. And Roland was also the king that puzzled him the most. Putting aside the ridiculous and frivolous rumors in the capital, this young ruler always gave him an unfathomable feeling. It was not that he was arrogant, nor was he pretending to be profound. It was as if his way of thinking was beyond the scope of an ordinary person, leaving him at a loss as to what to do. That reply was the best proof of that. Astrologer of Dispersion Star had never seen a king so indifferent to the news of the star of extinction. Half of the letter was a greeting, and the other half was an invitation for the Astrology Association to move to the western region. The letter also claimed that there was a better astronomical telescope here, which could fully meet the needs of stargazing. At the end of the letter, Roland unhurriedly mentioned that Neverwinter had found new clues about the bloody moon, and needed to discuss with the astrologers. Roland read the whole letter without surprise or fear, as if he had casually answered, "Oh, I see." Actually, even when Roland Wimbledon first appeared in the observatory and learned about the existence of the star of extinction, he was not too surprised. Even though it was a blessing for the people to have such a calm and collected king, the feeling of not receiving too much attention when his lifelong pursuit had finally been realized was still a little uncomfortable. The room was brightly lit. His Majesty was writing something, and the table was covered with thick documents. Dispersion Star had not seen such a scene for a long time. "Good evening, Your Majesty." He bowed with a slight sense of relief. "The Astrology Association sends its greetings to you." Chapter 670. Is it about the prophecy of the bloody moon? Dispersion Star sat down and asked, "That's part of it. Since you mentioned it, let's start with it." The young king smiled and poured him a cup of tea. This action made the scholar feel quite flattered. Compared to the few times he had met Timothy, Roland was undoubtedly much more approachable. The rumor about the bloody moon started more than 1,000 years ago. At that time there was neither Grey Castle nor Wimbledon. "But Your Majesty, the history of the bloody moon has only been recorded for more than 450 years. It's not that there are no records, but that it's been deliberately concealed." Roland changed into a more comfortable position in his chair. "There's still a long time. Let me tell you slowly." Then the scholar heard an incredible and shocking story. It crossed the uninhabited barbarian land, and traced back to the land of Dawn more than 1,000 years ago. It told him about the endless war between humans and demons, the symbol of the bloody moon and the Witch Empire, and the origin of the Four Kingdoms and the Church. If it was not the king who told him this, he would have called it absurd. However, Roland did not look like he was joking at all. When Roland finished his speech, Dispersion Star found it hard to breathe. He had always thought that the doomsday was a divine punishment from the gods. The rising of huge waves in the sea, the shaking of the earth, and the intermingling of underground fire and heavenly thunder. Although it was terrible, it was not enough to destroy all human beings. As long as preparations were made in advance, a considerable part of the city could be saved. However, according to His Majesty, the bloody moon was the signal of the demons' attack. Moreover, humans had failed twice in this conquest that lasted for thousands of years. If they failed again, they would be completely wiped out. "Your Majesty." Dispersion Star's voice became hoarse. "Where did you learn all this?" "The Witch Empire and the Church." Roland stretched out 2 fingers. "The establishment of the Four Kingdoms was related to them, and Grey Castle is no exception. In addition, I've dealt with demons in the west of the western region. They have their own civilization and army. They are a veritable alien race." "Then, what is the smile of the gods?" "No one knows. Maybe we'll find the answer after the battle of divine will." Dispersion Star fell silent. He did not know whether he should believe this horrifying story or not. However, he soon realized that this was related to the survival of Grey Castle and the continuity of the Wimbledon family. As a king, Roland would not deceive him, because it was meaningless. If he took this as the truth, it would explain His Majesty's attitude towards the witches. If their power did not come from the demons, they would naturally not be the enemy of humans. From the looks of it, the rumors circulating in the old king's city about the innocence of witches was only a small part of the truth that had surfaced. His Majesty did not release all the information, but carefully hid the facts that could easily cause panic. This was undoubtedly the right and wise decision. He still could not understand how the bloody moon in the sky had anything to do with the gate of hell. Your Majesty, what can I do for you? Dispersion Star vaguely realized that the reason why the king asked the Astrology Association to move to the western region several times was probably not for astrology. He knew more about the Star of Extinction than the astrologers. If he did not tell Dispersion Star this secret, he would never be able to imagine what had happened 1,000 years ago. This is the second question I want to talk to you about. It's even more important than the first one. Roland smiled and handed him a book. Take a look at this first. Dispersion Star took the book and found that the title on the cover was a row of words that he had never seen before. Analytic. Geometry? It was hard to pronounce, and the pigment used for the title was blue. Such a smooth and delicate indigo was not cheap. Just flip through it. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. There are still many things you need to learn in the future. Dispersion Star did not want to read at night. Although there were no candles in His Majesty's room, and the light source above his head was very stable, it was still not as bright as during the day. Stargazers needed to protect their eyes the most. However, since Roland was the king, it was not appropriate for him to refuse. Therefore, he pretended to skim through the book and read it carefully the next day. However, after flipping to the first page and glancing at the preface, he forgot his original idea. Describing the trajectory of an object with an arithmetic formula? As long as you know the key parameters, you can calculate the whole trajectory. Next was a row of horizontal and vertical intersecting lines. Each intersecting pattern had a simple figure drawn on it. Some were a straight line, some were a curve, some were an ellipse, and some were a multi-segment curve. They did not look strange at first glance, but Dispersion Star's eyes were attracted by the arithmetic formula on one side of the figure. It should be an arithmetic formula. Dispersion Star thought to himself. It had a plus sign and an equal sign, which began and ended with the same symbol. Although he could not understand it, he felt it was inexplicably wonderful. This sense of harmony seemed to be innate, and each symbol had its own unique charm. For example, a straight line and an ellipse could not be regarded as a kind of trajectory, but there was not much difference in their arithmetic formulas. Suddenly, an irrepressible thought arose in his mind. Could it be that all the figures in the world can be represented by an arithmetic formula? Excited, the scholar could not wait to turn to the second page. When Dispersion Star closed the book, he found that his neck was sore and numb. Obviously, he had been reading for more than an hour. His Majesty did not disturb him, but continued to write the manuscript at hand with a very serious look. Sorry, Your Majesty, I finished reading. Roland looked up and smiled. There are many parts that you can't understand, right? Yes, the symbols and expressions on it are not the ones taught in the palace. 9 out of 10 palace mentors came from the Astrology Association, but what His Majesty had written was completely beyond his imagination. It's very interesting, but I really can't figure out the mutual changes of the calculation formulas, Roland said. Because you haven't touched the equations, you have to learn these first if you want to understand the analytical part. The king pulled out a stack of books from the table and handed them to Dispersion Star as if he was performing a magic trick. Some of the titles were blue, some were green, and the names were weird and hard to pronounce. Dispersion Star's hands trembled slightly. Can I take them back and read them? Of course, Roland nodded. In fact, not only you, but I hope that all astrologers and apprentices can learn these contents together. He paused for a moment. The second thing I want to say is this. You don't have to worry too much about the bloody moon. Only by mastering all of them can the Astrology Association play an irreplaceable role in the war against the demons in the future. This part of the book is just an introduction, and there are more profound contents in the later parts. Not only the trajectories but also the grass and trees, the stars in the sky, and everything you see. What do you think? Are you willing to accept it? I'm willing, Your Majesty. Astrologer of Dispersion Star had long since forgotten about the Star of Extinction, and agreed without hesitation. He seemed to see the scene of thousands of stars moving according to his handwriting. The young king also revealed a smile. That smile was a little strange. For some reason, it reminded him of a hunter watching his prey fall into a trap. Chapter 671. Ever since number 76 became Yorko's maid, he had less and less fun with Denise. It was not because he had a new lover that he had forgotten his old one, but because he had to spend time taking care of the poor guide. Black Money was not joking when it said that she would be punished. When the supervisor, Silver Mask, brought her here, she was covered with whip marks and bruises, which made her look completely different from half a day ago. Yorko was glad that he had made this request in time. Otherwise, number 76 would have been beaten to a pulp. That was why Silver Mask said that she could no longer serve as a guide. Of course, customers would not allow a handicapped person to serve them. Fortunately, number 76's body was quite strong and not as weak as that of ordinary women, especially her abdomen and back, where he could still see the shallow muscle lines. After applying medicine, she recovered quickly and was now able to take care of the chores in the house, including some personal services. Just like today. Your Excellency, do you need me to massage your shoulders? Number 76 came over after cleaning the house and sat beside Yorko with a smile. According to the rules, a maid was not allowed to approach the master without the master's permission. Obviously, number 76 was still pleasing the guest in the way that Black Money had trained her. However, Yorko did not care at all. On the contrary, he liked this kind of active and enthusiastic teasing. If she was just a maid who followed the rules and followed her master's orders, then it would be too boring. Sit down. He put down the unofficial history and lay down on the bench. Number 76 also took off her shoes, bent her knees and let him rest his head on her thighs. Then, she pressed her slender and powerful fingers on his shoulders and slowly massaged them. Compared to those women who flirted rather than massaged, her strength was much heavier and her technique was much richer. Obviously, after a period of hard training, she could really relieve fatigue. Lying on her thighs, Yorko could clearly see number 76's face. After Black Money sent her here, she naturally did not need to wear the copper mask to hide her identity. To be honest, number 76 was not a particularly beautiful woman. Her facial features were just above average, let alone compared with witches. But those red lips were just right, especially when he looked up from below. The curved corners of her mouth especially aroused his interest. What was more wonderful was her figure. It was the first time that Yorko had experienced a woman with such power. She was not as plump as most noble women, nor as thin as poor girls. Her well-proportioned limbs, supple skin and curvaceous chest and abdomen. When she tightened her body, he could feel the slight bulge of her firm muscles. For someone like him who loved new things, this was much more attractive than pure appearance. The door was pushed open when Yorko was about to go further with her. It was Hill Fox who walked in. Well, the time for fun had come to an end. He sighed and sat up. This time I won't have to redeem another witch, will I? Hill did not answer but looked at number 76. The latter tactfully bowed and quickly left the room. He's just a servant. Yorko shrugged. You're too cautious. The situation in the Kingdom of Dawn is not stable. It's better to be careful at this time. Whether in terms of reputation or family background, Denise is much more powerful than number 76. Why don't I see you being so cautious about her? Because Denise Payton is a public figure. She can be investigated through various means, but a guide trained by Black Money can't be investigated. Hill sat down opposite him and placed a letter on the coffee table in the middle of the room. But I think I've found out her background. Yorko smiled proudly. Do you want to hear it? Oh. Hill raised his eyebrows. Tell me. It seemed that even the personal guard assigned by an old friend was not omniscient and omnipotent. He grinned. It takes a lot of time to train such a well-trained guide. Whether it's her skills in serving guests or her obviously tempered body, it's impossible to reach this level without more than 10 years of training. It has become her instinct to please and serve the customers. And how old is she now? About 21 or 22? No more than 25. That's right. That is to say, number 76 was about 5 or 6 years old before she received these training. Unless she's an immortal monster, it's unlikely that she comes from a force other than Black Money. Yorko spread out his hands. Black Money has nothing to do with us. The things they do are much scarier than buying slaves and protecting witches, which we haven't achieved yet. He laughed at himself. Witches don't need our protection. Seeing that Hill Fox had nothing to say, Yorko suddenly felt refreshed. He picked up the letter on the table and opened it. After a few glances, he frowned. It turned out to be an official diplomatic letter sent in the name of His Majesty, and the content of the letter made Yorko tremble with fear. The King of Grey Castle wants to stop the King of Dawn from persecuting witches? Yorko felt that he could not wrap his head around it. This is the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, not the western region of Grey Castle. Does my old friend think that Appen Moya will listen to me? Not to mention the series of threats that followed. For example, do not go against the times, the crumbling church is the best proof. And Grey Castle will not sit idly by and will reserve the right to take the next step, hoping that the new king will take care of himself. Although the wording was very euphemistic, Yorko believed that no one in the palace was a fool. Hill Fox was basically saying that if Grey Castle did not do what Grey Castle said, the Kingdom of Dawn would be Grey Castle's next enemy. How could he say such words in front of the King of Dawn? Yorko handed the letter to Hill with a gloomy face. He felt restless, and the joy of winning the debate was gone. The guard was right. For His Majesty, witches were much more important than the Covenant. But what else could this kind of threat do besides provoking the disgust of the nobles in the Kingdom of Dawn? A threat that could not be fulfilled was destined to become a laughing stock. What should I do? Hill was the only one who could give him advice now. Do as His Majesty says. Hill quickly finished reading the letter. This is your duty as an ambassador. As for Appen Moya's reaction, I guess he will at most throw thunder and drive you out of the palace. There won't be any other danger. Then the relationship we built with the other nobles will be over, Yorko said gloomily. The big families in the city of Glow will definitely laugh at us as lunatics, and Roland will also become the new topic of conversation at the banquet. What good will this kind of empty threat do to His Majesty? Empty threat? Hill said noncommittally. Do you really think His Majesty is just saying that? Yorko's heart suddenly trembled. He looked at the guard in disbelief. This is not possible. Chapter 672. Yorko made a request to the King of Dawn to attend the court meeting the next day. Probably because they had just signed a peace treaty, his request was quickly approved. Two knights in exquisite armor welcomed him into the palace hall. 2 or 3 months ago, he had requested to see His Majesty many times, but all of his requests went unanswered. Now he hoped that His Majesty Appen would turn a blind eye to his requests, as he had done in the past. Unfortunately, the reality was always so unsatisfactory. The court meeting was obviously coming to an end when he walked into the hall. The young king was leaning on the throne and talking cheerfully with his ministers. Appen only sat up straight when he saw Yorko bend his knees to salute him. No need to be so polite. I heard that you brought a letter from Roland Wimbledon? Yes, Your Majesty. Yorko braced himself to reply. He congratulated you on your coronation, and hoped that the friendship between the two countries could continue for a long time. That's a novel statement. Appen Moya smiled. Did he prepare any gifts? Oh well. Of course, the ambassador said with a quick wit. The fleet of gifts is still on the way. This letter was sent here by a fast horse. I remember that during the coronation of Wimbledon III, my father sent a team of 200 people to Grey Castle. There were 11 carriages loaded with gifts, including gold wares, fine wine, silk satins, and beautiful women. I don't know what Roland's gift will be this time. I'm looking forward to it. There was a burst of laughter among the ministers. Was there such a thing? Yorko could not help but feel a little thirsty. Why didn't the letter mention anything about the gifts? It was understandable that he did not know, but it was unlikely that His Majesty did not know. Did he say anything else? Appen asked. For a moment, Yorko even wanted to leave. However, when he thought that if he offended the King of Dawn, he would at most be rejected by the nobles in King's City. If he disappointed His Majesty, he might have to replace him as the ambassador. Therefore he resisted the urge. His Majesty, I also hope you'll stop persecuting witches and treat them like free people. Yorko gritted his teeth and said, otherwise Grey Castle won't turn a blind eye to this kind of behavior. The church is the best example. After he finished speaking, the hall instantly quietened down. The ambassador could feel sweat beading on his forehead. Did Roland Wimbledon really say that? After a while, Apen Moya said, show me the letter. Immediately, a knight came to Yorko and grabbed the parchment in his hand. Even though he did not dare to look into the King of Dawn's eyes, he could tell that the King of Dawn's tone had become colder. Thinking of the condemnation and warning that occupied most of the letter, Yorko felt like crying on the spot. As expected, Apen threw the letter to the ground after reading it. Is this how Grey Castle treats its allies? Witches are innocent, so I have to let them go. Nonsense. The young king seemed to be unable to control his emotions. He stood up from the throne and said with a murderous look, look at what those damned witches have done to the Moya family. They invaded the palace, slaughtered the guards, and threatened me with my father's life to obey the church. If it wasn't for the poison they gave my father, he would still be sitting here in one piece. But you can only ascend the throne if he dies, right? However, Yorko only dared to say this in his mind. Your Majesty, please calm down. As far as I know, the witches trained by the church are not the same as other innocent people, just like ordinary people are also divided into. Shut up. Apen scolded. You have no idea how terrible those who have mastered the power of demons are. Even God's stone can't completely restrain them. Tell me, how can a group of people who are not bound by any rules obey us? Without the witches, the Kingdom of Dawn will only be more stable. I'm responsible for my people. It was impossible to reason with him. Yorko realized that his father had become a shadow in his heart when he saw Roland's flushed cheeks. This guy was about the same age as Roland, but he was almost the same age as his old friend in the King's City. Or maybe even worse. Look at His Majesty, who had been away from King's City for less than a year, but had already transformed into a real superior, while this guy was still under his father's protection. I'll write a letter to the King of Grey Castle, and tell him not to be tempted by those fallen witches. Threatening the Kingdom of Dawn for the devil's minions? That's ridiculous. Apen walked back and forth angrily. Grey Castle may be powerful, but he shouldn't forget who gave him the power. Without the support of the nobles, how could Roland deploy his army to the Kingdom of Dawn? If he invades the royal territory for this reason, he'll definitely treat his vassals in the same way in the future. Not only will my subjects resist to the end, but the nobles of Grey Castle will also not support him as they did against the church. My old friend seems to have done that, Yorko thought. Although he did not know how His Majesty defeated the church, he vaguely remembered that His Majesty did not rely on the nobles when he attacked King's City. At that time, few people in Grey Castle thought that Prince Wimbledon would win. Moreover, in the subsequent trial, almost all the great nobles were caught. Otherwise, he would not have been able to get the position of ambassador. In the end, as Hill had predicted, Apen Moya, who could not restrain his anger, drove him out of the palace. Fortunately, to Yorko's relief, none of the other ministers responded to the king, although they were surprised. Their reaction was much better than he had expected. Of course, when they saw the letter that was thrown to the ground, it was inevitable that they would laugh at him behind his back. As soon as he returned to his residence, Otto Luashi followed him. Does His Majesty really think this way? Otherwise, I wouldn't lie to you. Yorko collapsed on the bench and said, why are you here to laugh at me? No. I just think that Apen's new policy is a bit impulsive. He really wants the people of the Kingdom of Dawn to live a stable life, but this kind of search and arrest method will make people panic. Then you should talk to him. He doesn't listen. Otto smiled bitterly. He's like a different person when it comes to witches. But you can't blame him. If you've witnessed the changes in the palace with your own eyes. He bit his lip and said, no, it's nothing. His Majesty Moya's death was a huge blow to Apen. According to his age, he should have inherited the throne in another 5 or 6 years. I heard that Wimbledon III was also killed by the witches of the church. On this point, if only he could be as steady as His Majesty. Yorko looked at Otto in surprise. Why did he have a feeling that Otto was not the eldest son of one of the three big families in the Kingdom of Dawn, but a noble of Grey Castle? Was His Majesty really so prestigious that he could make the nobles of neighboring countries stand on his side? Anyway, I'll find another chance to talk to Appin. Now he doesn't even listen to Earl Quinn's words. After finishing his tea, Otto got up and was about to leave when number 76 suddenly ran into the room. Chapter 673. Yorko suddenly sighed in his heart. Damn it, didn't we agree not to see each other again? It was just a polite saying to find the ambassador if there was trouble. Don't take it seriously. He looked at Otto and hesitated for a while before saying, bring her in. If the sponsor of the exhibition was not here, he would have directly used the excuse that the ambassador was not in the mansion at the moment, and asked her to come again. Number 76 quickly took her hand and walked into the room. It was Amy, the 10th item of the black money auction. The witch anxiously grabbed Yorko's arm as soon as she saw him. Sir, please help us. Annie and the others are in danger. In danger? This was probably the most difficult kind of help. Sit down and tell me what happened. He patted her shoulder and said, what happened? Our hiding place has been discovered. Amy took a few breaths and said intermittently, a large number of patrols surrounded the orphanage and blocked the nearby streets. I saw more than one team of knights, searching for witches street by street. The others are still trapped inside. I beg you to save them. Are there other witches besides you and Annie? There are also Hero and Broken Sword. Hero has lost her legs and can only be carried by Annie. It's troublesome enough to hide one, but there are 4? He sucked in a breath of cold air. How did you escape? The food in the house is running out, so I went to buy some food nearby. When I came back, I found them everywhere. She sounded like she was about to cry. Yorko was in a dilemma. The ambassador of Grey Castle was just an empty title without any real power. How could he stop those patrols? Moreover, this arrest was ordered by the King of Dawn. He had just defended the king in the palace. If he stood up to protect the witches now, the result would probably be more than just banishment from the palace. Don't worry, they'll be fine. Number 76 comforted Amy while stroking her back. Sir Yorko must have a way to bring them back safely. No way. Everything will be fine if they listen to me and submit to His Majesty as soon as possible. What about Mr. Hill? Otto asked. I don't know. He never reports to me about his actions, and I often don't see him for a long time. Yorko frowned. If you want to see him, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until after dinner. How about this? I'll go find Earl Quinn first. He's the king's prime minister and is in charge of the patrols. Maybe he can give them a chance to escape. Wait, he will listen to you? I don't know, but I have to try. Otto showed a complicated look. Do you remember the witch friend I told you about? Her name is Andrea Quinn, and she is Earl Quinn's biological daughter. As time passed, Yorko could do nothing but stand by the window and look into the distance. Number 76 showed her amazing ability to comfort Amy. She coaxed the frightened Amy to sleep on the bench. It could be seen that this guy had been running all the way and was too anxious, so he was very tired. But even so, to be able to fall asleep in such a place, it could only be said that she was indeed too trusting of others. In the evening, Hillfox finally returned to the ambassador's residence. Where have you been? Yorko found 3 people following him as soon as he asked. No, to be exact, there were 2.5 people. One of them was half a head taller than Hill, with some blood on her face and a vigilant look in her bright eyes. It was Annie who had sneaked into Black Money to save Hill. She was carrying a purple-haired woman on her back. The woman was tied to Annie by 2 belts from her waist to her shoulders, probably for the convenience of movement. Based on the empty trouser legs, she should be the hero who had lost her legs. The last person was about the same height as number 76. Her shoulder-length hair was almost silver, and she looked a little listless. She was holding her waist and swaying as if she had been seriously injured. You all escaped. That's great. Amy, who was awakened by the noise, was stunned at first, and then she threw herself into Annie's arms excitedly. Was anyone hurt by the night? I'm okay, only broken sword. Her magic power is a little exhausted. I was so worried about you. Amy finally could not hold back her emotions and sobbed softly. Sister Annie is here. Don't be afraid. Hiro comforted her. How did you meet them? Yorko opened his mouth wide. It's a long story. They have to leave here as soon as possible. Hill grabbed the ambassador's hand and led him to the bedroom alone. Listen, before the city gate closes, you have to leave the city of Glow tonight. I've already prepared 5 carriages, a total of 5. The first 2 are for transporting wheat and fruits, and the last 3 are for transporting people. Wait a minute, Yorko interrupted. Did you just say? You? It's you and the witches, not me, Hill said word by word. In order not to hinder His Majesty's plan, we can't lose the news of the Kingdom of Dawn. But I'm the ambassador. You have to leave because you're the ambassador. Hill's voice became more and more steady at times like this. Listen, I didn't save these 3 witches. What? Yorko could not help but be stunned. Not you. I've set up spies around the knight's martial arts field. If you can't find the witches, you might as well see how the opponents find them. So I received the news as soon as they moved out. But when they arrived, the block had been surrounded, and only the black street rats could enter. So you bribed the rats? Since I arrived in the Kingdom of Dawn, I've been keeping in touch with the local rats. Although it costs me a lot, it can always be useful at critical moments. Hill said in a low voice, but when I used the rats I bribed to track them down, the 3 witches had already escaped the encirclement. Isn't that good? I'll ask Denise to send them away and pretend that nothing happened. But it's not normal. Hill shook his head. The King of Dawn obviously knows exactly where the witches are hiding, and the people he mobilized are enough to turn the besieged block upside down. How did they escape? There's only one explanation. The witches were deliberately released. Perhaps Appin wants to use this method to catch more witches in hiding, or find out the people who support the witches. Yorko swallowed hard. If that's the case, it's too dangerous for you to stay in the City of Glow. The safest choice is to leave as soon as possible. Hill continued. If you can bring back 4 witches for His Majesty, the credit will be much more than an ambassador's position. What about you? He hesitated. If you're caught, they can only catch a famous person, but I'm a nameless person hiding in the dark. In their eyes, I don't exist at all. Hill chuckled. No one will notice that a guard is missing from the team of ambassadors, and Lord Otto will cover for me. Do you remember what I mentioned to you? I'm just an ordinary acrobat. The next time you come to the Kingdom of Dawn with His Majesty, you may see a brand new acrobatic troupe in this prosperous City of Glow. Chapter 674. In the end, Yorko listened to Hill's advice and left the City of Glow in a carriage under the setting sun. The coachmen were all Hill's subordinates. Yorko heard that they used to be part of the acrobatic troupe. After following the caravan to transport slaves for several times, they were very confident about the evacuation route. The carriages did not slow down until the sun had completely set. However, even though the land was shrouded in darkness, they persisted in carrying oil lamps for more than 2 hours before pitching a camp in a desolate field. The carriages formed a circle around the bonfire. The young man who called himself Clown was skillfully fetching water to cook porridge, while the tall and muscular Rock Mountain was feeding the horses. There was also Magician, who was in charge of security and patrolling, and the Calm brothers, who were setting up simple traps. Rather than calling them an acrobatic troupe, they were more like an army. Yorko found that he did not need to do anything, and the fragrant oatmeal had already been handed to him. In addition, there was also a plate of bacon and an apple. He finally knew why Hill chose to transport these things. These so-called goods for sale were enough to meet the needs of all the witches even if they had to spend 1 or 2 months on the road. However, since he could load the food so quickly, could he have been ready to escape the Kingdom of Dawn at any time? And according to the guard, he still kept in touch with the Black Street Rat. My God! Is this guy really just an acrobat? Yorko decided to ask his old friend when he returned to Grey Castle. The coachman consciously carried the oatmeal to the periphery of the carriage, leaving only Yorko, number 76, and the 4 witches around the bonfire. "I'm sorry for what I said and did last time," Annie said generously. "You didn't hand us over to the King of Dawn, but I still can't completely trust you." "Why?" Amy was puzzled. "He doesn't look like a bad guy." Yorko blushed a little when he heard that Annie was not a bad guy. He had never thought of himself as a good guy. Fortunately, the light of the bonfire could cover it up for him. "Ahem, I think it's probably because Miss Annie still doubts the purity of the witch organization in Grey Castle." "Purity?" "For example, some powerful nobles often secretly raise a few witches for their own amusement." "That's just one aspect," Annie interrupted. "As long as there's a one-sided deception and exploitation, no matter in the Kingdom of Wolfheart or in Grey Castle, it's still a cage for witches. There's no essential difference. Of course, if I can prove that the witch organization in Grey Castle is really as you said, I will formally apologize to you." "It doesn't matter." Yorko shrugged. "My task is to send you to His Majesty. After that, it has nothing to do with me. Even if you want to apologize, you might not be able to see me." The atmosphere at the scene was a little stiff, and only the crackling of the bonfire could be heard. Normally, he would never allow the conversation to descend into an impasse. However, when it came to this group of witches, he really couldn't get excited. Not only had they disrupted his peaceful life as an ambassador, but they had also brought a lot of risks to the emissary mission. It was not wrong to be cautious, but when the person being suspected was himself, this kind of feeling was not so easy to get over. The last one to break the silence was number 76. "Are you all from the Kingdom of Wolfheart?" she asked. "I heard from Amy that you've known each other for a long time." Annie nodded. "Although we weren't born in the same city, but you're right. The Kingdom of Wolfheart has been annexed by the Church. You must have experienced a lot of hardships on your way to the Kingdom of Dawn." Number 76 leaned over and touched the empty trouser leg of Hiro. She lowered her voice and asked, "Was her leg also injured by the people of the church during the escape?" Hiro bit his lips, revealed a sad expression, and lowered his head. "It was cut off by the person she was guarding." Annie's answer was unexpected. At the most critical moment of the Kingdom of Wolfheart, she stood up, but in the end, she was hated by the people. "Injured by the person she was guarding?" Annie nodded. "If you want to know, I can tell you, but it's not a relaxing story." Number 76 looked at Hiro for a moment and replied seriously, "I want to know." Although Yorko pretended to be focused on eating the bacon, his curiosity was aroused. A year ago, when the army of the church attacked the Kingdom of Wolfheart, they threw a large number of corpses with demonic plague into the city, trying to weaken the resistance of the king's city, just like what they did in the Broken Tooth Castle. Annie threw 2 branches into the bonfire, which splashed some sparks. But this time the demonic plague didn't spread, and it was because of Hiro's ability. She could transfer the disease to other living creatures, and thus prevented the spread of the plague. "What kind of living creatures?" "Mice, cats, dogs, cows, sheep. And of course humans," she said slowly. "The citizens dug a big pit in the slums, and the infected people would gather there. Hiro transferred the disease to the animals, and then threw the animals into the pit and burned them. Gradually, people regarded her as the savior of the Kingdom of Wolfheart, and began to call her Hiro. Amy and I also received treatment from her. But the good times didn't last long. A large animal could help 5 or 6 infected people recover before it died, while cats and dogs could only accept the transfer of 1 or 2 people. In addition, the demonic plague was repeatedly spread by the church. Even if the citizens of the Kingdom of Wolfheart caught all the living creatures that could run and burned them in front of the big pit in the slums, they still couldn't meet the needs of every patient. As the war continued, they turned their attention to the living. This sentence made Yorko shudder with fear. Number 76 moved to Hiro's side and gently held her in her arms. "It's not your fault." Annie's expression was particularly solemn in the flickering light of the fire. Of course it's not her fault. From the beginning, those people didn't give her the right to choose. The first people to be thrown into the pit were criminals, prisoners, and volunteers, and then the elderly, injured soldiers, and captives of the Judgment Army. But Hero didn't agree to the demands of those madmen, especially the soldiers who didn't want to die and the underage people who surrendered. She was unwilling to do anything. So people's attitude towards her changed, and there were even rumors that she colluded with the church. She was obviously the enemy, but she wanted to save their lives. The savior became a traitor, and Hero was also imprisoned. If it wasn't for the need to use her ability, she would have been sent to the gallows. After that, the church made a comeback, and it only took them one day to break through the city wall of the king's city. When the city was breached, the watchman who had been treated by her chopped off her legs with an axe, and then set the prison on fire. He also said that it was because of Hero's collusion with the church that the kingdom of Wolfheart was destroyed. She couldn't go anywhere. The traitor should be destroyed together with the city in this fire cage. Chapter 675. How could the believers of the church save a witch? Yorko unconsciously put down the bacon and focused all his attention on Annie. They broke out of the cage with Hero. Later, under the cover of these captives, she escaped the search of the church. After the war, the surviving Judgment warriors even sent her food and clothes for a period of time. They didn't bid farewell to Hero until the army returned to Hermes. Before leaving, all the Judgment warriors who had stayed in that cage came to express their gratitude to her. Yorko frowned. But the title of hero will it be? She is Hero, Annie said firmly. No matter how the people who were cured by her think of her, she saved tens of thousands of people in Wolfheart City, as well as my and Amy's lives. She is fully deserving of this title. The ambassador couldn't help but sigh. It turned out that the pain that this group of witches had suffered was much more cruel than he had imagined. If he were to be treated like this, not to mention trusting ordinary people, even if he saw everyone as an enemy, it would be normal for him to want to kill them all. The unhappiness of being suspected by Annie gradually dissipated. Her leg may have a chance to recover. What? Are you telling the truth? What should we do? Everyone turned to look at Yorko, including Hero. She looked like she was only 18 or 19 years old. Even though she had been ravaged by the war, her eyes were still full of expectation instead of numbness and blankness. Ahem, I'm not sure. Yorko rubbed his nose. Hill once mentioned that there might be more than 300 witches gathered in Grey Castle, and the power of the devil. No, I mean abilities are always strange, right? Maybe someone can regrow a severed limb, or simply make a new one for her. 300. Number 76 was surprised. How did the king of Grey Castle recruit so many witches? It's a long story. My old friend is a born king. He has long seen through the tricks of the church. Not only did he stipulate that witches could live like ordinary people in his territory, but he also spread the idea that witches were innocent to all parts of Grey Castle. After a long time, there will naturally be many witches who will join his command and work for him. Yorko took the opportunity to flatter His Majesty. So you don't have to worry about your future at all. His Majesty's City of Neverwinter claims that everyone can find a suitable job, including witches. What kind of job? Amy's eyes were shining. How would I know? I've never been to Neverwinter. Well, of course it depends on what kind of ability you have. For example, if you can control fire, you can be a blacksmith, or a whirlwind, or a mill, or a windmill, or something like that. Yorko fabricated. Anyway, His Majesty plans to build a new king's city in the western region, and needs a lot of manpower. Even if your ability can't be used, you can still work like ordinary people. It does sound good. Annie gave Amy a look. But lies are always better than reality. Right now I know. You can't trust me completely, can you? Yorko spread out his hands and said, when the time comes, just trust your own eyes. When Wolfheart City was conquered, I happened to be staying at Amy's house. I noticed the strange behavior of the Judgment Army, so I followed them and found Hero. Annie fiddled with the bonfire and said, it was several months later that I met Duan Run. She was caught by the church believers stationed there, and was going to be escorted to the Holy City. I happened to stay at Amy's house when Wolfheart City was conquered. I noticed the strange behavior of the Judgment Army, So I followed them and found Hero," Annie said while fiddling with the bonfire. It was several months later that I met Duan Run. She was caught by the church believers stationed there, and was going to be escorted to the holy city. "Were you alone?" "If I had enough time to prepare, killing a group of people is not much more difficult than killing animals," Annie said calmly. But after that ambush, the church's search for Wolf Heart City increased several times. We couldn't hide anymore, so we mingled with the refugees and left Wolf Heart City. Finally, we went all the way south and lived in an orphanage in the city of Glow. "What an incredible escape," number 76 exclaimed. "And it's not over yet," Yorko thought. "Although the Kingdom of Dawn is not as terrible as the church, it is still more than enough to crush us." He hoped that Hill's worries were not true. Otherwise, App and Moya would never let them go. As long as they were still in the territory of the Kingdom of Dawn, they could not be considered safe. He shook his head and put these annoying thoughts behind him. "Go to bed early after dinner. We have to continue our journey tomorrow morning." The rest of the escape was unexpectedly smooth. Under the magician's plan, they went to the suburbs and did not enter the city. 5 days later, they arrived at Windward Ridge in the Kingdom of Dawn. After another day's journey south, they would enter the northern region of Grey Castle. Yorko also relaxed a little. After all, it was not a good feeling to be tense all the way. Every night, he would wake up with a start at the slightest noise. Number 76 was much calmer than him. She not only took care of the witches but also took care of himself. After a few days, she had become quite familiar with the witches, especially Amy, who was gullible. She almost regarded number 76 as her fourth sister. Yorko leaned against the cushion and looked out of the window at the rolling hills and withered fields. He could not help humming a tune in his heart. His ambassador position was ruined, but at least he brought back 4 witches for his old friend. If what Hill said was right, what kind of reward would His Majesty give him? Just as he was full of expectation and daydreaming, the magician who was in charge of guarding suddenly caught up from the back of the convoy. "Sir, we may be in trouble. Someone seems to be following us." "What?" Yorko was shocked and quickly stuck his head out of the window, but he did not find anything unusual. "Those people are night. They are about 7 or 8 miles away from us. You can't see them." The magician controlled the horse under him to keep its body parallel to the carriage. "They're not moving fast, but we're slower. At this rate, they'll find us sooner or later and catch up with us." "Are you sure they're enemies?" "I'm not sure. I just saw them from a distance. But we can't bet on this chance. There are about 20 to 30 of them. They're fully armored and don't have any horses. They must have found us by following the ruts. Then what should we do?" Yorko panicked. "We have to abandon the carriage and walk. There's a dense forest nearby. Horses can't pass through there, so the knight can't show his full speed." The magician said in a low voice, "But this will only slow us down to the same level as them. Once they catch up with us, we'll all die. To be foolproof, it's best to lead the convoy forward and attract them to the main road." Chapter 676. The carriages stopped by the roadside. The Chone brothers were busy tying the carriages together so that they could be driven by one person. After a fierce argument, the witches were finally persuaded by Annie to follow the clown into the woods. Soon, it was Yorko's and the rest's turn. "Sir, it's time for us to go." Rock Mountain passed by him with a bag of food on his back. "Otherwise, all our efforts will be in vain if the enemy notices us. Later, I want to say a few more words to her." He thought it would take a long time to make a decision, but it only took him less than a quarter of an hour to decide. The person who stood out was number 76. Although Rock Mountain and Annie also expressed their willingness to stay, Yorko finally chose her as the nominal leader of the team. "I've received 5 years of combat training in the Black Money, so I can run fast. Don't worry about me too much." Number 70's speech was very simple as an ordinary farewell. "Isn't there a village in front of us? When I drive the carriages there and blend in with the villagers, they will never find me. When the storm is over, I'll meet you at the border city of Grey Castle. Remember to wait for me there. However, The answer that the magician secretly told him was that the village was 30 miles away, and it was almost impossible for the people who stayed behind to reach there before the night. Moreover, after the carriages were connected, the speed of the journey would be greatly reduced, which made the chance even slimmer. If the pursuers were not following the order of the King of Dawn to capture the witches, then everything would be a false alarm. However, if the pursuers were as the magician worried, Yorko could imagine how the deceived knight would vent his anger on number 76 even with his eyes closed. He faintly realized that if the convoy was intercepted by the Knight Regiment of King's City, he would be the only one who could survive. Apen Moya might ask for a large ransom from Roland and ridicule him as the laughingstock of the nobles, but he would not easily send him to the guillotine. Apart from him, the others would basically die if they were caught. Perhaps he was the one who should stay behind to attract the pursuers' attention. Yorko had wanted to stand out several times, but his fear made him unable to move his feet. Until the end, he had not been able to say those words. The ambassador is the face of the king. I can't be taken back to be ridiculed and insulted, because that would be equivalent to insulting the king of Grey Castle. He could only comfort himself in this way. If he did not think so, he could not even look into number 70's eyes. Damn it, she was clearly just a slave that he had bought. Yorko walked up to 76 and was about to say something, but she spoke first. Sir, this is my own choice. It has nothing to do with black money. Although Silver Mask always taught us to be ready to sacrifice for black money, I don't like it at all. I thought I would stay underground for the rest of my life, trying to please the customers, and when I grew old, I would become the new Silver Mask, or I would be sent to work as a laborer, never to see the light of day again. But you took me away from that place and allowed me to experience the vast world outside. I have no regrets. Hurry up and enter the forest, or it will be too late. But, thank you, sir. Number 76 smiled. Without your words, I might have been beaten to death in the underground Karst cave. My life belongs to you, and I may not be in danger. If there is a chance, let's meet again in Grey Castle. Sir, we have to go, Brother Calm urged him from behind. Yorko took a deep breath and turned to leave. Yes, she was just a slave. This was the most appropriate choice. Although he thought so, his heart seemed to be blocked. Before entering the forest, Yorko turned his head for the last time and saw that number 76 had driven the caravan forward slowly. She did not stop or wave goodbye, as if it was just a simple farewell, just like the reason why she stood out. Soon, the shadows of the trees blocked his sight. Number 76 did not let the caravan go all the way. After about a mile, she stopped the horse. She could not see the entrance to the forest anymore. She jumped off the horse and sat at the end of the carriage, quietly waiting for the pursuers to come. Sitting for a long time might be a long time, but it was just a moment for her. In the long years, she had no lack of time, so waiting had become a habit. When the sun gradually set in the west, the figures of the knight appeared at the end of the road. They did not wear the emblem and colorful satin of the Knight Regiment of King's City, but their exquisite armor and tall horses showed that the pursuers did come from the big city. Number 76 silently counted the number of the pursuers. There were 35 people in total, half of whom were squires. But from their eyes and behavior, it could be seen that these squires were much worse than the knight in the small city. Seeing the carriage stopped by the road, the leader frowned. He flicked his whip in the air, and the knight immediately swarmed up and surrounded the caravan. Sir Logan, there is no one in the carriage. Interesting. It seems that our ambassador of Grey Castle has sent out scouts. Logan sneered. Caro, Chester, you two go back and check the footprints on both sides of the road. Since they abandoned the carriage and fled, it is impossible to leave no traces. This sentence had already explained their purpose for coming. Sir, this woman. Cut off her hands and feet and interrogate her. But since she dared to stay here, you won't be able to get anything out of her. No need, they escaped to the forest. Number 76 stood up and said, It's not far behind you. But what? A knight had already pulled out his sword and reached for her arm with his other free hand. Obviously, even if she told them the answer, they would not let her go. But you won't have the chance to trouble the witches anymore. Number 76 raised her hand and grabbed the knight's wrist with the speed of lightning. Then she pulled hard, and the burly knight flew into her arms like a child. His head was tucked under her armpit. The shoulders closed slightly, and the armor made a creaking sound that made one's teeth ache. Then, with a snap, the helmet left its original position, leaving a distance of about a fist's width between it and the collar armor at the neck. The knight convulsed like a dehydrated fish. Let go of Charlie. Damn it, kill her. The others all pulled out their swords and stabbed her. Chapter 677. The blade cut through the armor neatly. Blood splashed out from the gap like tiny red lines. Unexpectedly, the victim did not scream. Instead, he clenched his teeth and grabbed her hand that was holding the sword, as if he wanted to fight for a chance for his companion. Unfortunately, he ignored the huge gap in strength between them. Number 76 easily broke free from his grip. She pulled out her sword and kicked him away at the same time. The place where the knight was kicked deflated as if he had been hit by a blunt weapon. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground without making a sound. It seemed that her fists and feet were more convenient. Number 76 glanced at the sword that was full of cracks after only one blow. She simply threw it aside and pounced on the others with her bare hands. The hunter became the prey in an instant. She leaped high and moved quickly on the shoulders of the clumsy knight. Every time she landed on the head of a person, she would clamp the helmet with her feet and rotate her body with inertia. The crisp sound of cervical vertebrae breaking could be heard. Before the person fell, she had already kicked away and leaped to the next enemy. Compared with number 76's light movements, the knight's counterattack and evasion were no different from that of a wooden stake. It was not a big deal if she did not land on the enemy's head. It was very easy for her to strike the enemy's joints to make him lose his balance, and then give a fatal kick. Or she could lure the enemy and let them attack her teammates from the front and back. This is impossible. Damn monster. After several rounds of fighting, the knight found that their enemy could not be judged by common sense. She was not only extremely strong, but also knew swordsmanship and close combat like the back of her hand. She was a skilled and ruthless fighter. No matter how they looked at it, they could not associate her precise killing methods with the 20-year-old girl in front of them. Get out of my way, all of you. With a loud shout, Sir Logan rushed into the crowd, pulled up its front hooves and stepped on number 76. The others hurriedly helped to block the gap and tried to trap her. Number 76 grinned. Instead of retreating, she raised her hands and grabbed the two hooves of the horse. The horse neighed, but remained motionless. What she did next made everyone unable to believe their eyes. She lifted Sir and his mount off the ground and swept them towards the surrounding knight. Those who were hit suffered minor fractures and vomited blood, while those who suffered serious injuries died on the spot. Sir was naturally the most miserable one. After being knocked off the horse, his body had been twisted into an abnormal shape. The pursuers who were still alive collapsed. They mounted their horses and scrambled to escape from this place. They were eager to get as far away from this monster as possible, but number 76 obviously would not give them the chance. Once the enemy gave up resisting, what followed was no different from a massacre. By the time number 76 cleaned up all the traces of the battle, it was completely dark outside. The corpses of the knights were thrown into the farmland not far away, and scattered wheat stalks were used as the most basic cover. Although it was only a matter of time before they were discovered, by that time, the witches would have already withdrawn into the territory of Grey Castle. She got into the most luxuriously decorated carriage, lifted the soft cushion on which Yurko usually lay, and carefully took out a magic stone ring which was shining with colorful light from under the cushion. Even under the faint moonlight, one could see that there was a cyclone slowly rotating inside the crystal-like crystal. After carefully examining the ring, number 76 carefully put it into her arms, rearranged the soft cushion, and lay on her back. After that, all she needed to do was to go to the next village unhurriedly and hire a coachman to take her to Grey Castle. They might not stay at the border for too long or even a day, but as long as her destination was the western region of Grey Castle, She would see those witches again one day. Looking at the bright crescent moon outside the window, number 76 could not help but let out a sigh. More than 400 years had passed, and the union that once controlled the vast and fertile land had disappeared like dust. The only thing that had not changed was the starry sky in the night. Only when she looked up at the sky could she feel that she was still alive, not living in the underground, not living in the present after the union had disappeared, but living in the holy city of Tequila 400 years ago. That incomparably prosperous witch empire. After that, the road of escape could no longer be considered as living. The only thing that kept her going was a remnant of hope. How does it feel to change back into a female body? Someone asked. Someone asked. Do you feel touched by being yourself again? She took 2 deep breaths and tried to move her wrists and ankles. The distance is shorter. Of course. Of course, it's because this body is relatively short and stout, so it's not suitable for you to serve those mortals. The voice chuckled. Besides, there are very few female gods punishment warriors, so you don't have to be so picky. Looks and age are also very important, another person chimed in. If the beauty standards of mortals didn't change drastically, why would anyone want those bodies that look no different from men? Just standing there was enough to spoil his appetite. If you don't believe me, just look at Elena. She would rather have a male body than a defective one. That's right, yours is already the prettiest out of everyone. You know what I mean, Pasha. She raised her head helplessly and looked at the huge sarcoma with wriggling tentacles at the top of the cave. In this way, I have to practice controlling my limbs again. From sewing to wielding a sword, I have to spend time practicing every movement. It doesn't matter. A tentacle dropped down and gently poked her forehead. The only thing we don't lack is time. Why do we have to deal with mortals? Aletheia was soaking in the scorching lava and blowing a series of bubbles to show her dissatisfaction. Can't you bring the witches here to test their talents? Have you been sleeping for too long that your brain has become muddled? Pasha retorted. It's not like 400 years ago. Catching 1 or 2 witches is still acceptable, but do you intend to catch hundreds of witches and bring them to the mountains? I don't want to be regarded as a monster by these juniors. Then we can also let the witches carry out this task, right? Don't forget that these bodies that can move around are the witches' enemies. First of all, she has to trust us completely and have the ability to protect herself. Where can we find such a person? Now that the mortals have taken over the outside world, we have to deal with them sooner or later, just like in the Land of Dawn during the first battle of Divine Will. Pasha paused and pointed a tentacle at her. What do you think? Chapter 678. Occasionally, when she did not feel like training, she would enter the deepest part of the underground labyrinth to take a look at the magic core that the Tequila survivors had high hopes for. This is the fully repaired instrument of divine retribution? Are you sure it works? The largest core looked like a simple spindle, and its volume was close to that of a senior witch's experimental tower. Dozens of white scaffolds were like ribs wrapped around internal organs, gathering magic into it. Its extraordinariness was also very obvious. There was clearly nothing hanging or supporting it, but it was able to float in the air of the maze hall. Under the cold light of the core, the underground was no longer just a monotonous fiery red color. Of course, I've been studying it for 385 years. A blob of flesh emerged from the top of the cave and landed beside her with its tentacles. The more I study it, the more I feel that it is the work of the gods. In comparison, the things that the Quest Society had been fiddling with were nothing. Magic stone sigil? I haven't even touched the surface of magic power. If we had discovered this relic 400 years earlier, there might not have been a second battle of divine will. At the mention of magic cores, Celine would become very excited. She had no choice but to pat Celine's rough skin. Have you verified the other cores? Of course, Pasha even used the phantom instrument to perform a miracle in the mortal kingdom thousands of miles away. You might have been sleeping at that time, so you didn't see this moment. Thousands of miles away? She said in surprise. Yes, it's far beyond the reach of any ability. The infinity sigil is nothing in front of it. Selene waved her tentacles and said, "This is the power of the magic core. It can give witches the ability to go beyond their own limits. The best proof is that the common man who knelt down in fear after witnessing the miracle is the core. It's the direction we should go, not the damn God's punishment army. Long live Lady Natalia." "But without the God's punishment army plan, we can't continue," she reminded him. Well, long live Lady Alice too," Selene mumbled reluctantly. "But I heard from Pasha that a chosen one is needed to activate the instrument of divine retribution, right?" "That's right, chosen one. This magic core was too huge and complicated. Without a chosen one, it would forever be a dead object and could not become a new god." Selene hooked her hand with her tentacle. "So our hope rests on you. Please find her. If she really exists." At the mention of this question, Sarcoma's voice instantly deepened. "Yes, if she really exists. Why can't I become the chosen one? I heard that Starfall City was defeated. They were defeated by mortals." After the news came, the magma underground began to boil. Whether it was the sleepers or the watchers, they all waved their tentacles excitedly. This was the only way they could express their feelings. But not everyone was excited about this. How is that possible? For example, the way Aletheia danced meant shock and anger. How could those guys lose to mortals? "Is the source reliable?" someone asked. "I'll ask the Chamber of Commerce of Dawn to investigate." Pasha gestured for them to be quiet with her tentacles. "Calm down. Don't destroy the cave." It was very strange. They all looked exactly the same. All huge sarcomas with tentacles all over their skin, but she could easily tell them apart. Perhaps after staying here for hundreds of years, even the frequency of their breathing and the way they twisted their tentacles had been engraved in her mind. Pasha lowered her huge body and immersed herself in the magma. "To tequila." All the sarcomas that could still move drooped down and said one after another, "To tequila." The surging magma calmed down. "Once the news is confirmed, I suggest that we immediately take back the god's legacy," Elena said loudly. "Starfall City doesn't deserve it anymore." "But that will inevitably lead to a direct conflict with the god's punishment army, and I don't think they will be defenseless. Even if Starfall City was defeated by mortals, it doesn't mean that Hermes will suffer a great loss." Aletheia expressed her doubts. "Who knows how the mortals won? Maybe they just surrounded and killed 100 God's punishment army soldiers, and regarded it as a great victory. It's not impossible." "I think so too." Many people voiced their agreement. "Another group of mortals will help us figure it out," Pasha said. "But the most important thing now is to find the chosen one. Banach Lothar has set up the stage, and is waiting for the actors to come on stage. If we can find the chosen one on this trip, the demons will be annihilated and the witches will usher in the most glorious moment." She walked to the exit of the ruins and stopped. It was a large hall. Half of the dome had been crushed by the soil, and there was an atrium in the center of the hall, which led to the ground tens of meters high. Bright white light sprinkled down along the atrium, and formed a soft beam of light, illuminating the square of land at her feet. There were 2 tombs facing the atrium. There was not a trace of dust on the tombstones, which formed a sharp contrast with the dilapidated ground around it. Obviously, someone had been cleaning this place for hundreds of years, and had even planted a circle of white flowers for the people in the tombs. She bent down and knelt on one knee in front of the tombs. This was the burial place of the greatest witches. No matter what kind of differences they had and how fierce the disputes were, they were all for the continuation of the witches. And after they died, they were still close to each other, and never separated. 2 of the 3 chiefs of the Union. Alice, the eternal queen of Starfall. Natalia, the dazzling queen of Sunchisser. May the gods be with you. After praying, she stood up and nodded gently to the dome. "I'm ready. Send me away." A tentacle stretched out from the shadow, curled around her waist and rose to the atrium. The palm-sized sky grew bigger and bigger until it suddenly occupied her whole field of vision. She blinked to adapt to the strong light, and slowly opened her eyes. The long-lost world on the ground was completely revealed in front of her. I can only send you up to here. Pasha's tentacle hovered at the entrance of the cave. This body can't see the sun. I know. She bent down and hugged the tentacle goodbye. Wait for my good news. By the way, you can't use your original name for the time being. The Chamber of Commerce of Mortals has arranged a new identity for you and a suitable name. Number 76. Sounds good. She smiled. Then I'm leaving. Take care. You too. Chapter 679. Although walking in the forest greatly slowed down their speed, it was still safe and sound. 3 days later, a few miles away from the border, Yorko and his entourage unexpectedly met a group of Grey Castle soldiers who were searching along the road. He recognized them at first glance because of their brown fur uniforms and the long metal pipes on their backs. After returning to the city of Evernight with the army and meeting with Duke Kant, Roland finally understood what had happened. After receiving Hill's report, His Majesty had sent 2 secret letters. One of them instructed the detachments of the First Army stationed in Deep Valley Town to divide into 4 teams and enter the Kingdom of Dawn from the 4 intersections of the border between the 2 kingdoms to pick up the retreating diplomats. The other one informed the Duke of the Northern region to prepare for war. In other words, it was to start collecting food, cotton cloth, carriages and other materials needed for war. Once the main force arrived in the northern region, they could immediately set off for war. Fortunately, the emissary delegation was safe and sound. The Duke even heaved a sigh of relief when he said this, which made Yorko feel flattered. But what moved him the most was his old friend's reaction to this matter. Although he knew that the 4 witches in the team made up the majority, the secret letter still mentioned the name of the ambassador, Yorko, and even listed him at the top of the list. This treatment alone made him feel that all the fright and torment he had suffered along the way were worth it. Yorko wrote a long letter about what happened during the evacuation and handed it to the Duke. He hoped that His Majesty would lift the war preparations in the northern region after receiving this letter. Now he finally knew that Hill was right. His Majesty's attitude towards this matter was not just a casual remark. In addition, he was also surprised by the First Army's reaction speed. Minus the time it took for the messenger to deliver the letter, it meant that the army, which was originally used to guard against the remnants of the church and demonic beasts, had already taken action on the day they received the order. It was not that he had never seen nobles mobilizing troops for war, but it took them half a month just to gather the knight, mercenaries and freedmen, not to mention dividing them into groups to carry out tasks. As long as the troops were dispersed and there were fewer people supervising them, the mercenaries who had received the advance payment would probably run away in one night. This was probably the reason why his old friend was able to break into King's City in one day. Yorko now vaguely understood that His Majesty's army was different from the ones he had seen before. Not only in terms of weapons, but also in every aspect, it was far superior to the nobles' vassals. At the same time, as an ambassador, he was not alone. The entire kingdom was not only his shield, but also his sharp blade. At the thought of this, he felt his chest swell up, as if there was a ball of fire burning in it. Now, the only one Yorko was worried about was number 76. According to the agreement, the one who arrived first would hang a 4-color flag in an eye-catching place. Duke Kant sent people to search the city of Evernight, but they did not find such a sign. Now that they were living in the mansion arranged by the Duke, they simply set up a flagpole in front of the door and let the colorful canvas flutter in the wind. As long as one entered the inner city, they would be able to see this symbol at a glance. In fact, he was not the only one who was worried about number 76. Through the window, Yorko could often see Annie and Amy standing under the flagpole. Obviously, they wanted to see number 76 return safely as soon as possible. As they got to know each other better, Annie's attitude towards him changed bit by bit. At least, she didn't stare at him with vigilance like before. Hill's subordinates had come to him more than once, hoping that he could leave for the western region as soon as possible. The magician even told him bluntly that as the seducer, number 76 had little chance of surviving. If the knight had not chased after them, she would have arrived at the border village one day later, and arrived at the city of Evernight earlier than them. Now that there was still no movement at the meeting place, the result was basically decided. Yorko also understood this, but he still wanted to wait for a few more days, not for anything else but for her parting words. When the storm is over, I will meet up with you. It will be at the border city of Grey Castle. Remember to wait for me there. In the days after they parted, he finally understood where that strange feeling came from. Although number 76 was a slave in name, he had never treated her as a slave, whether in black money or in the Kingdom of Dawn. Yorko had made up his mind that if she could come back alive, he would set her free. Unfortunately, this realization came a little too late. Another 3 days passed. Just as he was about to leave the northern region the next day, things suddenly took a turn for the better. A carriage stopped by the flagpole. The coachman seemed rather anxious and wanted to say something to the guard at the door, but he hesitated and did not dare to go forward. Yorko saw everything from the window. Before he could go out, Annie and Amy appeared beside the carriage. Number 76 had come back. The news soon spread to every member of the emissary delegation. Even Duke Kant curiously came to see the brave maid who had sacrificed herself. But she was not in good condition. When Yorko saw number 76, she was covered with wounds. Her right hand and left foot were broken, and she could hardly move. Sir. Number 76 blinked her eyes and forced a smile. Sorry to keep you waiting. In an instant he felt his whole body relax. It's good that you're back. They stayed in the city of Evernight for another week, until number 76's injuries stabilized. Then they set off for Deep Valley Town, and left the northern region by ship. During this time, Yorko also asked about what happened after they parted. She was caught by the night of the city of Glow before sunset. In order to buy as much time as possible, she untied the reins of all the horses and drove them to run in the opposite direction to block the knight who was speeding up. At the same time, she changed to a lone horse and fled to the mountains beside the road. But before he could run far, he was blocked by a mountain stream. Knowing that she would die if she was caught, she directly jumped off the cliff, which was more than 30 meters deep. Fortunately, there were branches and vines on both sides of the cliff, so she did not fall to pieces. But during the process of rolling down, her head was bleeding and her limbs were broken by the protruding rocks. When she fell to the side of the stream, she had already passed out. Perhaps the knight had not found a suitable way down the mountain, or he thought that she was dead, so he did not continue to chase her. It was already late at night when she woke up. She stayed awake by relying on the cold water of the stream, and occasionally caught 1 or 2 small fish and shrimps. 2 days later, number 76 was found by the villagers who were fishing nearby and saved her life. Although the hero could transfer the pain, it could not heal the wounds. The only way was to send her to the western region to see if the witches there could help her recover. No matter what, she finally came back alive. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.